Good morning. The February 9th Board of Directors meeting is called to order. First, I'd like to ask our interpreters to explain how access interpretation happens. Hi, everybody. Hello. All right, I'm going to say it again. Good morning. Buenos dias. The February 9th Board of Directors meeting is called to order. First, I'd like to ask our interpreters to explain how access to interpretation will work.
Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, es decir, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and start with our tribal acknowledgement. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home, the tribal nations of the San Diego region that have historically faced injustices. We acknowledge the harmony that existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples, who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respect to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most in any county in the United States, from 4 cultural groups, the Kumeyaay, the Guiño, the Luiseño, the Cupeño, and the Cahuillay. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experience in undoing the injustices of the past. Can you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. Tessa, can you please confirm quorum?
Thank you. We have a quorum with 19 of 19 voting jurisdictions present. And additionally, we have 6 advisory members present.
Okay, thank you. We will start today with non-agenda public and member comments. As a reminder, no comments shall use loud, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meetings. So it would not be tolerated. Any such language or any other disorderly conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of our board meeting is prohibited. For our board policy, the amount of time allotted for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipated to offer comment. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete a business while we still have quorum. Based on today's factors for today's meeting, each member of the public will be allotted 1 minute for their comments. Tessa, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chairwoman. I have 5 in-person member public comments, and we remind the public we take the first 5 public commenters at this time, and the remainder will be taken at the end of the meeting. The following will be called at the end of the meeting: Truth, Michael Brando, Alex Wong, Blair B., Eric Waswald, Paul the Bold, phone number 813, Mary D., The Original Draw, and Joaquin Lucan. Manny Rodriguez, please come to the podium.
Hello, board members and regional leaders. I just want to take this time to say good morning to everybody. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the work that you all do, and I'm looking forward to discussing the agenda items with all of you today. Also, I do approve of the metal detector. I think it was long overdue, and a lot of cities here already have them. And considering that our region's finest are all here, I think it was long overdue. Other than that, good morning, and looking forward to the agenda today.
Our next commenter, Christina Marquez, you'll be followed by Robert Garman.
Good morning, Christina Marquez. I agree with the previous commenter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to be here and make comments. SANDAG board and staff, you guys have a lot of heavy weight on your shoulders. As a native San Diegan, born and raised in Escondido, I saw my father drive back and forth from Escondido to San Diego for over 30 years because he worked at Xerox down here in San Diego. I would love to have it that we have a completed line that would be able to transport people so they don't have to go through the stress of driving, and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. Thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you.
Robert Garman, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Corey Schumacher.
Robert Gurman, Lakeside Citizens Against Gillespie's Expansion, Low-Flying Aircraft. My hobby is aviation. You have a handout, and I'll be using handouts and videos more because of the 1-minute rule. You really can't get anything expressed. And the two most pressing things for us right now, please look at the video. It'll answer a lot of questions, get the other side of the coin on aviation and what's happening with aviation in San Diego County. Yeah, I will leave it at that. Our two pressing issues right now we feel are timely is AB 653, which is putting all airports in San Diego County under the jurisdiction of the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, and leaded avgas, which has 20 times more lead than our automotive fuel that we outlawed over 20 years ago. Thank you. Well, I got 10 seconds. I'm born and raised here. Worked in the mixer industry, union truck driver. I've delivered to all of these airports and all the freeways throughout San Diego County, so I'm familiar with this. Thank you.
Your time expired. Corey Schumacher, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by the final commenter at this time, Rita Clement.
All right, good morning, SANDAG staff and SANDAG board. My name is Corey Schumacher, and I'm here in my own capacity this morning to speak to you because I know that this work that you do is isolating, especially when single board members are attacked repeatedly, but that actually demoralizes the whole board. And so today I want to express my deep admiration for the work that you do every day on this board. This is the people's work. The courage and tenacity you model for us every day. You show up here and throughout the county is a testament to your dedication to the people who have elected you. We rely on you to make our decisions to make the decisions on our behalf. This is the people's work, and we want to continue to support you as you uplift and support equitable transportation project in our county. Thank you for doing the people's work, and also wanted to thank SANDAG staff who do the hard work of breaking down complex concepts for us every day, which helps to keep our San Diego County moving forward. Thank you.
And our final non-agenda public commenter, Rita Clement, please come to the podium.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, SANDAG board members and staff. My name is Rita Clement and I live in Chula Vista. I'm a volunteer with San Diego 350. Last year, the County Board of Supervisors accepted the regional decarbonization framework that it had commissioned, a groundbreaking assessment of what our region needs to do effectively address the climate change crisis. It is now vitally important that the county implement its responsibilities, including county control of land use. We encourage respectful collaboration as we all work together to implement these projects. Thank you.
That concludes the non-agenda public comments at this time.
Thank you. Are there any non-agenda member comments at this time? All right. Oh, National City. Sorry, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I just want to acknowledge the efforts across all of our cities. Specifically, I'm speaking for my city, National City, the efforts for helping individuals impacted by the floods of late. And there's a lot of gratitude that goes out to our partners such as EDCO, Team Rubicon, Disaster Aid USA, and our CERT team in National City. These are individuals that volunteer in emergency response. And all of this work, all of the volunteers, all of the community that came together to help. I just want to offer for the record for total assessments in National City, we had 209 total assessments, 171 households and 38 businesses were impacted on January 22nd. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is this an issue that SANDAG, how are we involved in the operations of Gillespie Field? No. Okay, thank you.
I'm like, I don't know. All right, council member.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a quick report with regards to what happened just a few days ago. The EPA has approved an annual air quality standard for particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in size in the air, known as PM 2.5. These particles are hazardous to health because they travel deep into your lungs and can be absorbed by your body, potentially causing heart disease, lung disease, and cancer. Just for clarification, air quality is managed by at 3 levels: the EPA at the federal level, CARB, California Air Resources Board at the state level, and at the county level by the APCD, the Air Pollution Control District, which actually I chaired the board of. The San Diego County meets the old annual standard of 12 microns per cubic meter of air. The new annual standard will be 9 microns per cubic meter, a 25% decrease. EPA will likely designate San Diego to be in non-compliance of this standard. And if so, San Diego County APCD will need to develop a plan to reduce PM 2.5 emissions in San Diego County. These particulate matters come from industrial activities, wood fires, natural gas, power plants, heating, and other businesses. But more importantly, here for our work here at SANDAG, moving people, services, and goods around this region using cars, trucks, buses, rail lines, and airplanes. These are major sources of this particulate matter. The environmental justice communities often suffer a higher burden from PM 2.5 due to the proximity to industries, freeways, and this suffering is really a major health effect, causing harm to those communities and to their family budgets. So I think it is important for us to recognize that it's not that, this change in regulation or standard was long due. And we shouldn't worry about so much when both the EPA and all the other regulatory agencies come up with new rules to meet these needs. We should be moving to reduce these particulate matters, this pollution, as fast as possible, irregardless of any rules that come down. And the Air Pollution Control District here in San Diego is committed to meeting these new standards in order to protect public health, particularly for those communities most burdened by air pollution. And we will seek support from our local, state, and federal partners. And we really want to work with EPA, or I'm sorry, with SANDAG in that effort. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Gasterland.
Yes, thank you. I provided a PDF to show along with my comments. I have it. Okay, thank you. I wanted to report to the board that on Monday of this week, the SANDAG engineering staff came to the Del Mar City Council meeting to report on what has happened with all the outreach regarding a tunnel underneath Del Mar and to get the railroad tracks off the bluff. And loud and clear, the residents have been asking, please study a tunnel that would start in the Solana Beach Trench and then continue underneath the fairgrounds, underneath the lagoon to I-5 in some way. And the SANDAG staff kindly asked for a sketch of what this would look like. So I've given the key points here that it would need to slope downward in the Solana Beach Trench, and it could get to 66 or 84 feet below the current level of the tracks at Via de la Valle. Next slide, please. And next slide. So I'm going to show you just briefly 3 scenarios. So here's a scenario that goes under the parking lot and over to I-5 under the lagoon. The concept is that all of these yellow lines here would be underneath the ground. If this can be done, and that's the if, to be studied in 2024, it would be on state-owned land, no eminent domain needed. We'd have a tunnel instead of the bridge, no need for the trestle bridge, perhaps no need for it to be replaced, or perhaps it becomes redundant. Easier design, it could be constructed sooner. If we can do it sooner, we don't need the seawalls and the mitigation that goes with it down on the beach. Lower costs potentially, no private property needed. Next slide. So zooming out, next slide. Yeah, zooming out, here is the scenario looking along I-5 with the dashed line, and you see the grassy knoll down at the bottom. That's the area where if we can get it along I-5, and I'll show you a scenario under Crest Canyon, if we can get it down under Crest Canyon, then it can come out to the east of Penasquitos Lagoon. What this does is it gets the railroad tracks out of both lagoons. Next. And here's view 3 showing the necessity that the trench would need to be made deeper in Solana Beach sufficiently to tunnel, but the hope is that it could be covered and we'd have a park for nearly a mile, a new linear park where the trench is now. Next. And here you can see scenario 2, taking it underneath Crest Canyon, again, the dashed line with where the SANDAG engineering staff would be the ones who would take it the rest of the way to that knoll. Next. Scenario 3 is the modest scenario where it would go down 66 feet under Via de la Valle and 135 feet down by the North River bank with a seasonal platform that would be underground. And this would follow pretty much where the tracks are now and take it into the hill, but deep underground. So at least the tunneling with a portal would be in a location where it would not be noticed by anybody. The con here is that we'd have freight under people's homes. There are a lot of people in Del Mar really worried and scared about this. So thank you for giving me a few minutes to walk you through the scenarios and the sketches that the people of Del Mar will be providing to the SANDAG staff at the SANDAG staff's request. Thank you.
Councilmember Burkholder.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to call attention and really appreciate my Public Works Department and the Transportation Director during the storm. We had a lot of issues, not nearly like what San Diego did, but they are excellent. And I was just hoping, I can't see my colleagues down there, so I'm just hoping Caltrans is here so they can maybe give us an update on the 78. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, our military installations are part of the SANDAG family through their membership in the Military Working Group, and I'd like to acknowledge a loss they suffered this week. Tragically, a few days ago, Marines on their way to MCS Miramar crashed near Pine Valley. We remember those who lost their lives in service to our country, and we express our condolences to their family, friends, loved ones, fellow Marines and service members. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment.
Are you on consent, Chairwoman? We've
We
already
did
done
public
comment,
already.
non-agenda public
All
comment.
right, so, okay, so I just want to do one change, and so I'm going to go ahead and do the chair's report under consent. So I'll go ahead and start and then we'll open it up for public comment. Right?
Do you want to do any comments on the CEO and so forth?
I was going to do it in my chair report. So,
Okay.
all right. So, and then I'm going to have, after I do my chair report, I'll ask Caltrans to give their update. Okay. All right. So we have our 2024 board retreat scheduled for March 8th. I know it's International Women's Day, so everybody should be very happy about that day. And we did it from 8:30 to 3:30 since I know folks are pretty busy, but we have a really good agenda based on all of the recommendations that all of you had. You will be receiving an email shortly with details. We're waiting on finalizing the location, so look out for that. On the recruitment process, CEO recruitment process, Pam at the CPS HR team are continuing to hear from candidates from all over the country, and she's actively reaching out to individuals that are qualified for this position, so it's moving forward. Applications are due by February 23rd, and so we've already had a large number of applicants, and so looking forward to convening the subcommittee in mid-March to review the top-rated applicants with the goal of conducting first-round interviews by the end of March. And then one last thing, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has done so much for our communities. District 1 and District 4 in the County of San Diego were very much impacted. And I think you heard the first Vice Chair, Sean Elo, talk about how this is going to take, unfortunately, a long time to really make sure that we support our communities so that they are able to go back to their homes. And so I think as we're moving forward and being very grateful for all of us that continue to have our homes, I think anything that we can do as a county and as regional leaders to support this, I think it's going to take all of us to move forward as we do this. And then I also want to acknowledge my colleague from Imperial Beach because the storm also impacted the Tijuana River Valley incredibly and a lot of pollution. And so we're continuing to fight on that and work on that. But I wanted just to say thank you also to our OAS team in the county. One of the proposals that I'm going to be moving forward at the County of San Diego is so that we actually have a quarterly meeting or something of the sort so that all of the OAS folks can come together so that we can have a smoother transition, and particularly with local elected officials, so that I think this time around, even though we have a lot of communication and we work really well together, there is still sort of some misinformation about what the role of each entity is and how we move up the chain so that we can activate the county, activate the Cal OES, and then activate FEMA and funding that comes from all of that. And so I'm hoping that we do that. I think Councilmember Moreno and I were in a lot of meetings. We're trying to figure out what the next step is. And so I think it's important that all of us have that information and we work together as we're moving forward. So excited about that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Roy to give us a Caltrans update.
And sorry, what was your question? Just if I can address that first.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I was just hoping to get an update at the 78 in Carlsbad where it was flooded.
So our crews are working on our facilities to help clear out. And then we're working with the city to identify how we can keep debris and other things so the creeks it won't happen again. But we are working with your teams to clear the debris and address the flooding that took place. So it's ongoing effort, but with the amount of water that came in, it's just difficult to.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was a debris issue or what, because we know we've had this before, which it didn't seem like it was a debris issue. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I know that the North County residents will as well.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing thing, that constant maintenance and things. So we'll continue to communicate and work on that. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, bear with me one moment. I just want to say thank you, Chair Vargas and board members, for your leadership in the past storms. It's been very difficult, especially for some of the hardest hit communities. Caltrans is continually assessing the situation and trying to deal with road closures within 24 hours where possible, where issues arise, such as the sinkhole in the 78, where we were able to get the road open within 24 hours and address that issue. So we appreciate the communication and support. I just want to also mention that we're working towards a disaster declaration by the president. And that will allow for us to get more aid and federal funding for transportation issues that have been addressed, have been impacted by the storms. And you can work through my local assistance team. We've been reaching out to the different jurisdictions on how to access those funds and the requirements. So please reach out to us. Emails have gone out for any projects that need to happen in the future under emergency or response. So, and also I just want to say thank you to MTS for restoring the tracks on the Green Line. That's a lot of work and that's an important transportation mode that really is essential for people. So I just want to say thank you for that. And unless anyone have any other questions, that's my update. Thank you.
I do have a question. The previous chair, Catherine Blake-Spear, had set up a litter abatement subcommittee on SANDAG, and I was on that along with a few other folks. And one of the things that we kept seeing over and over again was that Caltrans was a little bit underemployed in terms of the efforts that you put out in cleaning up all of the roadways. But then the state of California came forth with some grants and that you were able to hire more folks. But it seems like one of the proactive things that should be taking place is that rather than, just looking at this as we'll clear it out right before a storm, is that we need more litter abatement on all of our freeways. It's bad on all of them. And if that's what caused what happened on the 78 and perhaps other locations, I would hope that there would be more efforts going forward to, maybe, you see those signs like sponsored by so-and-so business. And I don't know how proactive you are in dealing with them and getting them, how often they go out there and how often they go out on the on and off ramps. But it seems like that needs to be improved. And I would welcome your comments. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, just we do have the Adopt a Highway program that you do mention. And so that's regularly monitored to help support abatement. But I think Alan can speak to the Clean California efforts.
Good morning. Yeah, the challenge with the creeks is it's really a system. And so the creeks are coming off of the local communities, the local city. In the case of Carlsbad, the Buena Vista Creek that overflowed on the 78's kind of a shared responsibility between all of us, right? And so the litter and the encampments that come from everywhere, have made it very difficult to manage. I would stress, though, it's a system, right? So we've all got sort of our roles.
I hear. So it's a group effort.
It is.
And so we all need to work together. Do you see any gaps in that could be filled if we were to put our mind to it and our money to it or efforts in it?
There's always challenges. I know with Carlsbad, they've worked very hard to get the creek cleared because there's environmental constraints and permitting and that sort of thing, finding mitigation to remove the trees and plants. And as the rain comes down, more debris comes in and clogs those trees and it makes it even amplified, right? So yeah, I think working together is really the important thing, right? Working together to try to find mitigation or to streamline processes.
Great. And I'm sure those lines of communication are open and active. Wonderful.
Definitely.
Thank you.
I served on the so Mayor Minto.
Thank you. It's interesting that you mentioned the creek beds and whatnot. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people don't realize that the state of California, Caltrans, they have jurisdiction over many creek beds, many tributaries to different waterways. And they are encumbered like cities are. You mentioned about the creek up there at 78, where it takes a lot of permits to get any of the invasive species that are creating hazards removed. So I think we need to find some way at the state level or federal level, depending on who has jurisdiction at the time over whichever tributary or creek is, to be able to go in there on a regular basis, whether it's the California Conservation Corps or civil engineers or whomever might be able to do that work, because there's very few organizations that are actually allowed to do that work. I know in Santee, we have a creek bed that transitions from the city to Caltrans. And that has contributed to a lot of flooding. Matter of fact, it slowed down, believe it or not, our Forester Creek, and it rose over 20 feet during that big rain and actually flooded Mission Gorge Road. And if anybody knows that area, it's pretty hard to do that. And it's the first time in 30 years that I've seen anything close to that. And so I know that there's some plans to get out there and put some holes in that brush that's built up. And we appreciate that. But just like everybody else, we want to see it done sooner than later. And of course, we'd like to be first also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't even going to speak about this, but then there were some thoughts that came into my mind. So first of all, I do have a question about the corrugated metal pipe, because I know that was one of the things that had happened why we actually had that sinkhole on the 78. And so curious as to how that is progressing. Is it all complete? Because it seems like there's still some work going on, and I see someone's coming to answer.
Good morning again. I'm your 78 corridor director, so I have that one.
Well, then you stay there for a few questions.
Okay, sounds good. The emergency, we had the culvert failure last year, right? That work is all done. The collapsed culvert has been replaced. What you're seeing out there on 78 is more proactive work that we had already had planned, that a lot of that metal pipe reached the end of its useful life, and we're going out and replacing it throughout the corridor.
Okay, so that's not all completed yet.
It is not.
Okay. And then, so when you look at, just overall on the 78, I think some of the things, where it flooded, I'm not sure why that was, if it really was that it was backed up or whatnot. I feel like, the HOV lanes were already promised during Transnet. If we were to move forward on those on an earlier plan, as we promised the citizens of San Diego County as part of the Transnet funds, I think that there is an opportunity that we would be able to address some of these larger issues, like the flooding of the 78 and, the areas where we could really check to see if there needs to be more metal pipe, that sort of thing. So I feel like if we were able to do that, and this might be something that we could look at as SANDAG staff along with Caltrans, I think that there could be an opportunity, like I said, where we could look at the whole picture and adding the HOV lanes, because we are going to be doing that at some point in time. It's in the 2025 update, well, at least parts of that. So the connectors, the lanes, and then also address any flooding issues or water quality issues. So I think if we were able to incorporate all that together, that would be a good idea, just as an idea. And thank you for the update on the corrugated metal pipe. It'll be good to see that all completed, because that'll be a sigh of relief for many of us in North County, because the 78 not only gets people where they need to go, it also is a main thoroughfare from the 15 to the 5, and it also moves goods and services. So thank you very much, Alan.
If I could just interject as well, the good news also, we have a $100 million, what we call shop job, which is our operational and protective betterment project coming through next year on 78. So we're looking at culverts there. We're looking at paving. We'll be repaving 78. We'll be looking at ADA ramps and connected community improvements. So we do have a sizable investment coming to 78 real shortly.
Good to hear. I mean, you often hear me saying North County doesn't get our fair share, so it's good to hear that we'll be getting that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you. So I do have a report for you all this morning, a few things that I wanted to cover. First of all, as a result of our discussions with the board and implementing security measures, we did install the metal detectors. So this is our first go at it today. So we appreciate your support with this. We know we'll continue to refine how that all works. We want to make sure that the public is well aware that people need to arrive a little bit earlier in order to make it through the metal detectors. And for board members, just remember to bring your badges, and then you won't have to go through the metal detectors. So thank you for your support on that. I wanted to follow up on the State Route 125 and our tolling system. So we are full speed ahead in implementing the action plan that you all approved. We had our vendor team in for 2 solid days this week, working very closely with our SANDAG team. We're really excited about the progress we're already making. And the plan is to be able to deliver on the new system 7 months from now, and truly throughout this time period, making sure that all of our customers are charged appropriately. So we're continuing to work through that. We also will be going, Andre Dujon and Lucinda Bouchard, who heads up the Toll Operations Center, will be going to the City Council in Chula Vista next week to provide an update just on the funding, what it will take to pay off the toll road, what the delta is and steps there. And the chairwoman has also asked for us to convene a group of elected officials at the end of this month and talk about that as well, just so the public is fully informed about the progress, where we are, and our intention to make sure that both taxpayers and the folks using the system are treated equally and fairly throughout the process. I also wanted to update you. We had hoped to bring forward an item for a soft opening on the Otay Mesa East. And despite every entity, our partners locally, state and federal, I felt like we were moving heaven and earth to try to make something happen there. We did get feedback over the weekend from our federal partners that there's additional analysis that would need to be done. So we're not proceeding with that soft opening at this point in time. We are forging ahead with the long-term project, and I will be in Washington, D.C., actually with Councilmember Fisher starting this weekend. And this is part of the national conference of, I call it the National Conference of SANDAGs. There's about, believe it or not, there's about 300 of us throughout the nation. And so that conference starts on Sunday, but we use that opportunity to get together with our federal delegates and continue to work together on how we can move forward the Otay Mesa East project as well as the Low Sand project. So we'll be continuing to work on that. And then just a couple of other things I wanted to update you on, that the airport transit connection project, we will be bringing that to you at the end of this month. One of the things that we've been doing, and this is part of the work as your CEO that I promised to do, is really look at our work plan and make sure that that is aligning with your priorities and that we can really focus and execute on the priorities in the budget, as well as the budget amendment that you all approved this last fall. So in doing that, we're looking at our staffing and we're also looking at all of our consultant contracts and really making sure that we're asking our consultants to do the work that is needed, that's a gap that our staff can't already do. So I've been reaching out to our consultants throughout the San Diego community, letting them know that we're really looking at that and that we're bringing more of our work probably in-house. So we're building out our SANDAG teams. We will still need consultants to implement our work. I think something that's important to recognize that while we have $1 billion budget, only 5% of that is our SANDAG staff. So we do contract out a substantial amount of our work, but I want to make sure that we are using our staff expertise in that process. So it's all about transparency and accountability and being able to deliver on the projects and programs. So we have broadened our staff team on the airport connection project. And so we're going to be bringing that forward to you and the additional steps and analysis necessary to bring that project to fruition. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that next week on Valentine's Day, February 14th, we're hosting our annual Housing Policy Forum. And I want to thank the chairwoman for kicking that off for us. This is really the opportunity for all of us to work together so that we are united as we're working with the state of California and what the most important programs and projects are that need to be funded to address the housing need in the region. So that
I was
concludes.
thinking about that. Maybe we can add the component of sort of the damages that have taken place, because that was not in there. But maybe we can have a conversation about that as well.
I think that will be an important part of the conversation to have. We have so many people who became homeless as a result of the flood. So certainly we can do that. So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Jones?
Thank you. I want to commend you, Colleen, on a really good report. And I like to hear about a little less consulting and things in-house, because I feel like that leads to transparency and then also better control over what's happening in our projects. I did want to talk just a moment about the 125 in light of the fact that there is ongoing litigation that was discussed, and I'm wondering, and I do appreciate that we have switched to a new team. I'm being very careful on this, by the way, Mr. Kirk. I would like to maybe have a closed session so we can talk a little bit about accountability on our end so that something like this doesn't happen again. I don't really know when to bring that up, but it occurred to me that I think we should talk about, we do have a new team and I know that Ray Major's in charge of that. But I think just making sure that we find out everything as far as moving forward, and I'm looking at Mr. Kirk to see if he's wrong. My attorney usually looks at me and goes, so I'm trying to watch your eyes, but you're not looking at me.
I trust you.
I'd like to maybe have some closed session so that we could make sure that we have full accountability on our end so that something like this doesn't happen again.
We can absolutely discuss things with you to the extent that we can do them in closed session. Closed session on this would likely be focused upon status of existing litigation or threatened additional litigation. So we just have to be careful to keep it within the permissible scope of closed session.
Well, since you're our attorney, I'll leave that up to you, but
All
I
right.
think you know where I'm thinking.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I just want to remind folks that the Office of Independent Auditor is looking at this very thoroughly. And so part of their responsibility is to make sure that they come back to us with systems recommendations. And so happy to have a closed session, but know that her task is to ensure that she's taking a deeper dive and it includes all of our controls and all of systems. And then she'll come back and recommend what else could we do.
So kind of following up on that, would that also mean that we would identify where we failed on our end? Or
usually that's what auditors do. Auditors usually address any gaps and then also make recommendations and so that we can make systemic change and institutional change long-term so that we are able to function appropriately.
I don't know if I see Courtney here this morning, but do we know when that's going to come back? I don't recall. I know it came up at our last meeting. Sorry.
It's okay.
Sure. So her audit was going to be in 4 different parts. So the first part was going to be looking at the financials and how the customer accounts balanced with the financial accounts and the P&L. And then the second, third, and fourth part, the first part was going to be about the 45,000 customers and whether or not we've charged people correctly. The third part was going to be, if we charged them incorrectly, what have we done to rectify that? And then the fourth part was going to be how we ended up in the situation that we're in.
Okay, so yeah, that last part seems like that's the part.
And according to her audit plan right now, she would start those after she finished the financials, which would end at the end of February right now is what the anticipated date is. And then she would begin on those other 3. We really don't have an end date for those yet, but I would imagine it would be several months before we got to that.
I would also,
so maybe, yeah, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I would also encourage you to talk to her directly about what are some of your concerns that you have, so that if you have any of those concerns, she's making sure that those are incorporated into her assessment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that fourth part is probably what I'm talking about. I mean, we want to make sure that if we have a team in place that oversees that we're not having this happen again. I mean, it really just is an issue. Okay, thanks.
So one thing I'd like to add here, I think one of the things that came out loud and clear as a result of your discussion is the interest on behalf of the board about having things elevated sooner than later. And so one of the things we're also looking at is our policies on when things get elevated to the board. And so that is something that we'll be bringing back to you as well. So just to make sure that you stay informed, and look who arrived.
Your timing was impeccable.
All right. Do you want me to put you on the spot right now, or wait a minute? Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Courtney Ruby. I'm the independent performance auditor. And we will be, as Ray spoke to it, I'll just clarify 3 areas. We're looking at the accounting function. We're looking at the errors. And additionally, we're looking at the contracting piece and roles and responsibilities of the contractors as well as SANDAG. So those are the 3 buckets. typically in an investigation, we don't drill down and say, this is what we're looking at, this, and this. I'm always listening. I'm listening to you guys, right? We are moving forward on the investigation, working hard to get it to you, hopefully in March. It may come out in parts, or we may be working really hard and have it all done in March. So that's what we're doing. And it will talk about, as the chair mentioned, we will have a historical piece in there. You know, we'll look at gaps and we'll include recommendations.
Well, excellent, because the fact that we weren't notified for, I think it was 5 years or something like that, that there was a system failure. I don't want that to happen again. I think that really is us not overseeing and doing what we need to do on our end. And so how do we fix that broken system? Because it is broken. But I look forward to it. And thank you for being here. And thank you for being so responsive to us. I really do appreciate that. And I think I could speak for all of the board. You're being here, you're listening to us, you're paying attention really means a lot to us. And just really makes me think that we've done made a great decision. So thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Jones.
Let's see.
May I make a brief point of clarification before she leaves?
Okay,
Is that okay?
sure. I just want to make sure Ms. Maxon, can you hold on one second? I just want to make sure go through the process. Go ahead, Ms. Maxon.
Question for Colleen on the 125, 2 questions. One, you said you're going out to the Chula Vista City Council to present a status update. Will you also be including the Sweetwater Community Planning Group in one of your presentations?
So I'll make sure that I invite them to the actual workshop that we have. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. So my colleagues actually requested a meeting, so that we're actually gonna have a workshop. And the reason why we're gonna call it a workshop is because I wanna make sure that the local planning groups and entities that are part of that are able to come and hear what's happening. And we might, I'm thinking we're gonna have it in South Bay and not, so that people don't have to come all the way over here, but I gotta figure out all the logistics and make sure that everybody's available because
And my
their schedules are pretty tight, but yes.
Second question, Colleen or Ms. Vargas, is consideration of the increased traffic on surface streets as people try to bypass use of the toll road part of the decision for when the toll will be removed, since there seems to be a moving target on which date the toll will be removed? And since there's a lot of building out there, there's a lot more pressure on the toll road and on the surface streets.
It's the biggest issue in Bonita.
Okay.
So just to respond to your question, so there's the financial piece of paying off the toll road. Then there's the planning piece of the toll road. So we do have funding in future years in the budget to look at how that functions. So I think most of you know, and this kind of does start to play into the regional plan. When we have something in the plan, it's almost like a crayon line on a map. And then we continue to dig in and do more detailed analysis to make that exact determination. So anytime we're looking at improvements in a highway corridor, and I know Alan and Roy would agree with this, we also look at what happens on the parallel local streets and roads because that impacts what happens. So that's a long answer to yes, but the discussion right now that the Chula Vista City Council has asked for is more on how could this be paid off, the financials, and when, than that bigger planning piece.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a brief comment. Everybody probably already knows this, but sometimes when I hear some of the conversation about what the independent auditor is going to be looking at, I think at our last meeting, you mentioned, hey, she's going to be looking at these areas. And today, Deputy CEO said she's going to be looking at these areas. For me, for the public, it's really important to note, you can look at anything you want. So as you do your review and report, you're not restricted by anything we ask you, or, you think you may have instructions to review. You are the independent auditor. Anything you see as you're doing your reports, please add and explore. And that's what I support. So thank you so much.
Yeah, so I assume that she knew that, but I'm glad you put it on the record. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I think I heard one of you guys talking about upcoming travel, and one of the council members, I believe it was Fisher, is going to accompany you. I'm curious of the process of how Fisher is selected to go on the trips. I'm sorry, I can't.
He's the appointed member to that committee.
To that committee?
Yes.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank
Yes.
you.
You're welcome. All right, the next item on the agenda is, there's no one else? You're good? You're good? Okay. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public. And as I mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and put the report, the chair report as part of that.
Our first commenter on the consent agenda, and just to confirm, it is items 2, 3, 4, and 5. Truth, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Michael Brando.
All right, Colleen and Jack, are they gonna burn some GHGs again? And this morning, Sean thought he could get in without a badge and rode the elevator with him. No. And the board retreat, Nora, I'm actually glad it's only one day and at Southwestern because it's not as far for most people, you know, GHGs and VMT and all that stuff. Item 2 in the minutes under item 3, there's a misspelling on the word Lausanne. Item 3 on December 5th, it sounds like Joel went to the FACT meeting just for a pats on the back ceremony. On January 25th, I'm glad Blake, Spear, Levin, and Lisa finally took one of the ghost trains with the loud horns. Must have been nice while others were suffering with damaged public transit from the flooding caused by the city of San Diego's criminal negligence. And Joel and Lisa, you both talked about people needing buses for an affordable price for grocery shopping, but how are they going to afford groceries if a $10 transit pass is too much for them? And how many groceries will fit on a bus seat? I know neither of you ride. And item 4. The executive committee decides what gets talked about here, and yet almost none of you know what was passed this morning. And Jacktivist, this was my reaction, you know, to your particulates. Just been entertained. And Colleen, I think SANDAG needs to hire a toll expert.
Your time expired. Michael Brando, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by virtual commenter Paul the Bold.
Number 4, the Policy Advisory Committee, an active omission. What's not being talked about is how speakers are processed here. I was here first this morning and I was pushed to the end for non-agenda. No equity and inequality. This gentleman over here talked about how he's so glad that there is a metal detector. Well, the policy group needs to address this too, because we need a truth detector. There's so many lies and hypocrisy floating around in this room, some of you more so than others, that is what's damaging our society. And these smug people that look around and act like all of this is normal, it's actually aiding and abetting the devolution of San Diego County. Now, I know some of you know what's going on. Get with this policy advisory committee and come up with things that work. I do have faith that people can find goodness, but some of you, it's very questionable.
Our first public commenter, Paul the Bold, will be followed by the original draw and Blair Beekman. Paul the Bold, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Number 2, I would like to say a brief summary of the public comments, like at the Board of Supervisors, in the minutes, an account of public speakers in favor and opposed. 3, meetings and events, hopefully including the justification for paying their expenses. And I hope that Vice Chair Hebner enjoyed her ride on the train to Oceanside. Sorry the whole route to LA and SLO wasn't available, but by the way, this shows the pointlessness of keeping the route near the ocean. Let's see. The Policy Advisory Committee members, I'd be looking for 1 community member or several for different opinions. People of different backgrounds and geographic areas, no people who've supported illegal or fraudulent activity.
Your time expired. The next commenter, the original draw, will be followed by Blair Beekman, then phone number 813, and then the final commenter, Mary D. The original draw, go ahead.
Blair, I just wanted to say you need to look for the surveillance cameras in Maui. They're on the entrances and exits because they don't want anybody going in there. So that's something I think you'd be interested in. Yeah, Jacktivists, it is terrifying to think about the dystopian future that you would like for us to live in, because you just demonized every mode of transportation, even ones you guys are engaging in, saying that it's harming the communities and the budgets of people. And so basically, I don't know what the way to travel is in your world. I mean, I guess walking, right, and biking, good thing that's, we have storms. That'll be fun to do. Maybe we're going to teleportation, transport ourselves. Who knows? But it's very sad to see you guys brush off the responsibility of cleaning up the storms and the debris and all of the channels and all of that, because the jurisdiction is in question and you need a permit to actually clean it out. No wonder why you guys failed miserably to keep the people from having to be totally losing everything that they have in the storm. And no wonder it's because you guys want to get FEMA money, right? As long as you have a declaration of a disaster, you get more money.
Your time expired. Our next commenter, Blair Beekman, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Yeah, I'm visiting Maui again, and I've noticed there's quite a number of similarities between Maui and San Diego, what's going on at this time. I invite yourselves to check it out. Maybe some good connections can build and develop. About the meeting minutes process of the January 26th, there was very nicely spoken, I think, at that meeting by someone from National City, that we need to really be working on how to be more accountable about what really actually happened on the day of the flood issue, and can we get weather reports? That was a really nice gesture, and it opened an open, accountable community process. Good luck on accountability and really building our future and talking about future funding towards not harming each other and building towards peace and open democracy. Thanks.
Our next commenter, phone number 813, will be followed by the final commenter, Mary D. Phone number 813, please go ahead. You are self-muted.
I've been out here waiting to speak. During that time, I've asked 21 people if they knew who our county chair was. Only one person, two out of the 21 were fire department. Two were male people. One person knew who you were, and they called you Norma Varga. Aside from the bootlickers there who love going through metal detectors, majority of the people of this county don't know who you are. They're just tax cattle slaves, and they can't face the fact that government isn't there to help them. And you know who really can't face that fact? You people who actually believe you're doing the work of the people. You're not doing the people's work. People don't even know you freaking exist. I'm out here. You can see in the camera. You can see what I'm doing. Nobody knows you. Nobody knows you yet. You guys control the fate of the people of our county. Such a.
And your time expired. Our final commenter, Mary D. Please go ahead.
Hi, Mary D. here. This is for item 5, policy committee members and leadership. I have deep concerns about this item and who you allow to lead and to vote. I normally don't monitor the borders committee, so I was very surprised when I tuned in last time and found it being run by Mr. Escobar from Imperial County, who is not only merely an advisory member, but not even an elected official by San Diego County voters. That needs to end. SANDAG is a one-county MPO solely for San Diego County. While you may be a regional body, San Diego County residents merit leadership from our locally elected officials, not partisan favored out-of-county officials who are not voted on by the constituents in this county. I formally object to the dilution of representation, vote, and voices for county residents. Rectify this. Do not allow people who are not voted in by local residents to lead or vote. Thank you.
And that concludes the public comments on this item on consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any member comments? I just want to say thank you to Consuelo for letting people know who I am. I think it'll engage communities more. So I think it's super cool. So I appreciate it. Any other additional member comments? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious too about the meeting minutes and why we just write down the person's name that spoke, but we don't capture any kind of synopsis of what the issue was.
The public speakers are treated the same as any of you and the staff. And so what we do is we acknowledge who spoke, and then anyone can go, rather than our staff interpreting what someone said, we link back to the audio so you can hear exactly what they said. And that's the purpose.
Thanks, Colleen.
With that, we have, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right. I want to say thank you everyone who's agreed to serve on committees. I know that everybody's super busy, so appreciate the additional work that you do on behalf of the region. With that, we're going to turn over to the 2025 regional plan. This is an informational item only, so let's move. We're going to continue on, right, to the discussion. Staff will walk through the details of, you want to put it up there? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Colleen.
All right, the moment you've all been waiting for. We are here to present with you the initial concept summary. So just remember the regional plan is probably one of the most important things that this board is asked to act on every 4 years. And this is really what sets forth the ability for us to bring in state and federal dollars to implement all the transportation projects that you all want. This initial concept includes what's already in your approved capital program budget. It includes the projects that you approved to be added to that capital budget this last fall. And we've done our absolute best to incorporate the input that you've given us over the last several months in putting this together. So our charge now going forward, we want to get your input today and then move forward in actually doing the modeling work necessary to make sure that we can bring back to you a plan that complies with the law. And the laws that are the federal laws and the state laws that are imperative to continue to get state and federal dollars. And this is not just for SANDAG. These are state and federal dollars that come to all local jurisdictions as well. That's why this plan is so important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Antoinette to kick us off.
Thanks, Colleen.
1 second, okay? Go ahead.
We had a workshop last week where we put comments on a map, but they aren't reflected in the information.
Not yet, Mayor Kranz. Today is when we're going to get final comments from you and we'll make those
Okay,
changes
thank you.
afterwards. So the maps that you have in front of you today are the exact same maps that you saw 2 weeks ago, but there is a summary as attachment 1 to your staff report of the comments that you provided. And I'll talk today about some opportunities for addressing those comments. Okay, thanks. Okay, so at your meeting 2 weeks ago, we introduced the initial concept to you, and we really only had time to focus on projects. We worked in groups. You provided some comments. As I mentioned, those comments are transcribed in attachment 1 of your staff report. But the initial concept is more than just the projects. It's also the policies and the programs. I want to spend a little bit of time on that today so you understand what we're including in the plan. And then I will summarize for you kind of how we could move forward with addressing the comments that you've provided to date. So in addition to the workshop that we held, we did sub-regional briefings online. Some of you participated in those. We answered questions. And I also wanted to share that we're doing one-on-one briefings and sessions with your staff. So those started this week and they'll continue through the end of the month so that we'll have, you know, all of that input that we can take in, and then we'll adjust the maps at that point in time. Okay, just a few points of clarification. As Colleen said, this is an initial concept. This is not the draft plan. We are months away from being there. This is a network that we put together based on the feedback that we got from you, that we heard from the public, and that we think has a good opportunity of meeting those federal and state requirements that are so important to meet. We'll test this in the model. Once we get the projects right, the policies right, then we'll come back to you later this spring and let you know how it performed, if it met the targets that we need to meet or not. And then we can talk about options for changes to the network if we need to. Another thing I wanted to point out, because it came up in the workshop, is phasing. So we don't do detailed year-by-year phasing at the regional plan level. We group projects into 2 timeframes. So there's projects that can be constructed in the first 10 years between 2025 and 2035, and then those projects that could be constructed in the later years of the plan, 2036 to 2050. If something is in the later years of the plan, it doesn't mean that you have to wait until 2050 for that project to come along. It just means that during that time frame is when that project would be implemented. So the solid lines on the map are the earlier projects. The dotted lines are the projects in the later years. 2035 is a really important year. We've talked about it a lot because that's when we have to demonstrate to the state that we're reducing VMT and GHG by 19% per capita from 2005 levels. So we focus on projects in that timeframe that can help us to get there. Another thing that came up was some of you pointed out that you didn't see transit routes that are in your communities today. This is not inclusive of current transit routes. It's only future planned transit routes. So you don't see any of the improvements that we're proposing to make to transit that's on the ground today. So that includes things like increased frequency. We heard a lot from folks, the bus doesn't come enough, the trolley doesn't come enough. So there's frequency improvements. There's also hours of operation improvements. So making sure that people who have service jobs have transit in the evenings and early mornings. All right, you've seen this, this chart multiple times. This is how we got to the GHG reduction target in the amended 2021 regional plan. So about 9% of the 18.6% came from projects and programs and policies that we've implemented since 2005. And then you'll see that we get to the 18.6% through a wide variety of policies, projects, and programs. And there's a couple of things I want to point out here and remind you is that policies are really important, right? They can be implemented sooner, and they are generally more affordable than infrastructure. So you'll see that we got a huge, well, not huge, but in terms of the target, a big reduction from the investments that we make in electric vehicle programs, things like land use, our TDM program, telework, those are all really important. However, I shared with you last week that CARB is making some changes to their guidelines. So we won't be able to take the same level of credit for some of these programs and policies in the 2025 plan. So that applies to EV programs. We won't be able to take the same amount of credit for the incentives that we put into EV charging infrastructure. They've also said that we won't be able to round up in the plan. And then there are more requirements around the assumptions we make in the model, technical requirements that will make it a little bit harder to achieve the target. So we're starting at a different baseline here. So let's talk about the policies and programs. We have 10 policy areas in the plan. Most of these you've seen in past plans. There are 2 new policy areas, though. You'll see those on the next slide, and that's Vision Zero, because this board adopted a Vision Zero resolution a little over a year ago. And then health, that was a recent resolution that was adopted by the board late last year. So in terms of pricing strategies, this is both incentives like our Youth Opportunity Pass program and subsidizing transit passes. And it also includes fees like parking pricing or express lane fees. Under the climate category, this includes all of the clean transportation investments we make. So EV charging, zero emission vehicle incentive programs, and also things like climate adaptation and resiliency. Housing and land use, that includes a lot of the incentives that go to local jurisdictions for housing. So our Smart Growth Incentive Program, the funding that we got from the state that we're passing through to local jurisdictions through our Housing Acceleration Program. Under transportation technology, this is a package of technology solutions like connected vehicle technology, smart intersection technology, things that improve operations on the roadways. Transportation demand management, that's a program we've had for many, many years that helps get people into van pools, carpools, transit. We work with employers around the region to implement those programs, so it's a continuation of that. Vision Zero, I mentioned that's a new policy that's responding to the resolution that you all adopted, and that really just seeks to improve safety, reduce traffic fatalities and injuries on our roadways. Digital equity, this is implementing the digital equity action plan that we developed a few years ago and helping to ensure that everybody can access the internet and knows how to use technology. Habitat conservation, this is like our environmental mitigation program where we have preserved over 9,000 acres of sensitive land to serve as mitigation for some of our major infrastructure projects. Parking and curb management, this is policies and strategies that help to really optimize curb space and make sure that everyone has access to the curb. Fix it first, ensuring that we are maintaining and keeping in a good state of repair the infrastructure that we have today. And then last, health, which is the new policy area, and that includes programs that improve air quality and increase physical activity. Okay, so the cost of implementation. So there's a range here, and the reason that we have the range at this point is that we really need to do more modeling. We need to take in feedback from you, and then we can refine that a bit. But 33% of the cost is in that 2035 timeframe, and I mentioned that's a lot of things that we can implement quickly to help with VMT, GHG, and other commitments that we have made through the budget amendment and our capital improvement program. And then 2050 is about 67% of the costs. And if you remember last year, we talked about one of our requirements being developed being a fiscally constrained plan. So we have to project what kind of revenues are coming into the region over the life of the plan in order to show the federal government that we can pay for the projects in the plan. So I'm going to hand it over to Susan Huntington, who is our Director of Finance, Programming, and Grants, and she'll share with you how the projections are done for revenues.
Thank you. So what it means to be fiscally constrained is that the plan must demonstrate that sufficient funding is available to operate the services and maintain facilities, as well as implement all of the planned improvements, policies, and programs in the plan. We do that by identifying funding sources expected to be available over the life of the plan. We make assumptions for the magnitude of the revenue based on historic and observed trends. And then we align the eligible uses of the revenue with the projects and the programs in the plan. We assume that funds need to follow current guidelines. Please remember that the funding plan represents a reasonable funding scenario. It is not a funding commitment. So for the 2025 plan, I'll briefly describe the process that we've gone through thus far. It's the same process that we go through every 4 years when we're updating the plan. We're kind of building up the revenues from the ground up. So initially we start with the revenues of our prior plan. It's basically a mix of about 40 different fund sources. It's a mix of local, state, and federal funds. We update every fund source, including additional historical information and program updates. We consider existing, continuation, and future fund sources. So what that means is existing funds are those that are in legislation like Transnet from now until 2048. We consider continuation of fund sources like our federal formula funds, which aren't in current legislation going out to 2050, but it's reasonable to assume those funds will continue. And we also look to future fund sources, what might be happening in the region. We consider adding new funding programs that are used at other metropolitan planning organizations, which have been approved by state and federal agencies. And then we have here review of our assumptions. Both internal and external stakeholders are involved in that. So for the 2025 plan, we've identified and updated all of our revenue sources and assumptions, and that's linked in our agenda report. We've identified 92 to 107 billion in local funds, roughly 66% of the plan is local, 22 to 26 billion in state funding, and 25 to 29 billion in federal funding. To match up with how the programs and policies and costs are coming in, roughly 1/3 of the revenue, or 50 billion, is presumed to be available between 2025 and 2035. And the identified revenues are sufficient to cover the cost and uses of the initial concepts.
Great, thank you. And one thing I failed to mention on the cost slide is that I think we all recognize the cost of construction has gone up significantly. So the costs were escalated to account for inflation in this plan. So projects in previous plans cost a lot more in this plan. Okay, so the detailed feedback that you provided on your maps and to staff at the workshops is in attachment 1. If we missed anything, please let us know today. We have a lot of time for discussion, but we had really good discussions with all of you a couple of weeks ago, and there were some themes that came up, so I want to address some of those themes before we open it up for discussion. So there were a lot of comments, concerns about rapid projects, mostly related to routing or the types of roadway improvements that might be needed to accommodate rapid projects, concerns about bus-only lanes or the needs to perhaps remove medians on local streets and roads to accommodate rapid bus. And I want to be clear that planning for rapid projects moving forward, we'll do that very closely with city staff, and especially if they're operating on city roads. And we'll make sure that those routes address your preferences, address the constraints that you have, any needs that you have in your communities. So we'll figure out ways together to make rapid projects rapid. In terms of route planning, at the regional plan level, it's pretty conceptual, right? We're looking at how do we connect point A to point B and some of those major like destinations in between, but the exact streets, the exact routing is at a later stage in the project planning. So again, we'll be sure to work with all of you, and we'll be using data and your input to do that route planning. I do want to say that rapid projects are really important, particularly in those early years of the plan. Fast and frequent transit is what really moves the needle when it comes to increasing ridership and reducing VMT and GHG. And Ray Major's joining us today because he knows the model better than anyone, and he can answer any questions that you might have about that. The other thing that's good about the rapid projects is that they're more cost effective than rail, and they're faster to implement, and they're flexible, so they can be adapted over time. Flexible fleets, the overwhelming support for flexible fleets, and some of you had requests to expand service areas and adjust service areas, and we're looking at that, and we're going to be making many of those adjustments. Just one thing to keep in mind, though, is that the neighborhood electric vehicles, the NEVs, can only operate on certain streets and roads. So we have to take that into consideration when we're doing the service areas there. School connections, lots of interest in making sure that schools are connected to transit so that everybody in the region can take advantage of the Youth Opportunity Pass program. And schools are definitely major trip attractors that show up when we're looking at data, and we take into consideration when we're planning the transit network. Well, we can't connect every single school. We have good coverage, and we're working with our data science team to do a GIS analysis to determine the percentage of schools that are currently within a very short distance of transit. We'll get that information to you. Rural transportation services, a lot of discussion about making sure that folks who live in our unincorporated communities have transportation infrastructure and amenities and services. And the great news about the 2025 regional plan is we have far more services for rural communities than we have in past plans. We've got 6 flexible fleet microtransit service areas. We have new rapid and express bus route services. We have new circulator services. We have safety improvements and evacuation lanes on some of the state routes. So a lot more for rural transportation in our unincorporated communities. Freight and truck traffic came up, particularly in our South Bay communities, and there are a number of goods movement projects proposed in the plan. We have the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, as you know. We have the truck climbing lane on the 52. We have a lot of technology solutions like truck reservation systems that will help to smooth truck operations on the roadways. The SR 125 and managed lanes, there was a lot of discussion around making sure that we paid off the toll as quickly as possible. The initial concept that we presented to you has the toll being paid off, the toll road being paid off in 2037, and you requested that we move that up. That does require us to identify roughly $300 million in funding to be able to do that. So that would mean that we have to make some project adjustments to account for that. So connectors tend to cost around 275 to 300 million. So we can make adjustments to a connector in the plan and move that out to a later year. There are other things like operational improvements and interchange improvements that we could move out to a later year in the plan to be able to move that up. So that is an option. But we need to be careful about the projects we do move out of that early timeframe because we don't want to impact our VMT GHG goals. Rail improvements, there was a concern about the fact that the rail corridor, the east-west commuter rail corridor that was in the 2021 regional plan is not in the 2025 plan. And that's because that project did not perform well. When it was a cost benefit analysis, it didn't really demonstrate to be a project that benefited the region in terms of ridership. And we get better ridership with a rapid project and with improvements to existing trolley service. The Purple Line, there was a request to build that project by 2035. And while we would love to be able to do that, it's just not feasible from a design and engineering engineering and construction standpoint, it is a very long rail line. It's a very complex and complicated rail line. So we will continue to make good progress on that, but we would not be able to get that project constructed by 2035. And then there were some concerns about the need for double tracking the Sprinter corridor in North County. And this is something that has been in the plans, NCTD plans for quite a while. It would allow them to operate express service. Initial modeling analysis of the double tracking and that express service shows that it more than doubles transit ridership. And that helps, of course, with the mitigation that is needed for capacity increasing projects that are in the plan. And I just realized I wanted Alan to address managed lane feedback that we got above and beyond the 125. So I am going to hand it over to our partner, Alan Kassup from Caltrans, who really worked closely with the team on the managed lane network and ensuring it was consistent with the state's plans.
Thank you, Antoinette. And like Antoinette said, the managed lanes network that you see in the plan is a result of several months of collaborative effort between the state and SANDAG. And we really appreciate the effort to be at the table to build one plan that represents both the state objectives and the regional objectives. Also, I want to remind folks when they think about managed lanes, remember that there are many flavors of managed lanes. There are many varieties of managed lanes. What I mean by that is like a transit-only lane like we have in City Heights, that's a type of managed lane. I-15 express lane, type of managed lanes. Flex lanes like we have on the Coronado Bridge where we move the barrier back and forth, that's a managed lane. So, you know, the ultimate decision of what operating strategy you have for managed lanes, the great thing about managed lanes is they can change over time, right? So they're a very flexible system. And the ultimate decision, right, this is a starting point for the decision on operational strategy. Once the project moves into implementation, we get into the environmental document, we reevaluate looking at more information. So ongoing effort. I did want to highlight that the managed lanes network is a mix of new capacity and conversions. And as Antoinette said, right, the system has been the result of a lot of listening, right, and feedback from the CMCPs. As an example, something like SR 78, maybe a year ago, was a mix of conversions and new lanes. In the current plan, we're looking at just a new lane system. So, and then lastly, I'll say that, as Antoinette said, on the new lanes, the VMT mitigation is going to be, you know, a tough hill to climb, right? But we've got to do that, right? That's the law. And so what I like about this slide is when we bring those projects forward, you think of managed lanes as a freeway lane, but it's really a mix of a lot of these different strategies. And they're embedded in the managed lane, and they have to be. Especially from a mitigation perspective. So a good example, like we'll have BRT embedded in the managed lanes, or we'll have arterial improvements, smart street improvements embedded in that project so that it works as a system. So it's a little bit deceiving sometimes when you think about just the managed lanes project. I'm just encouraging to think about it as a broader project.
One other point of clarification around managed lanes. Some of you asked if we had managed lanes on regional arterials or local streets and roads, and it's not proposed for that. It's only on the state highway system. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, last thing was cross-border connections, and there was a lot of comments about cross-border congestion and how this is really a regional issue. And I reassure you, we have addressed border transportation very comprehensively in the 2025 network. There is improvements to the San Ysidro port of entry. There's increased transit service in the border region with Blue Line Express. We've incorporated the state's plans to extend the coaster down to the border as well. There's a new circulator route that connects San Ysidro to the CBX terminal. And then, of course, there's the enhanced transit connection at San Ysidro for the border crossing. So a number of projects, and Otay East, of course, in the border region that will really help with congestion and moving people safely and efficiently.
I have a question on that. So where do we put in some of these projects opportunities for innovation? I think I've shared this with all of you before, right? I remember when I was a staffer many, many years ago when everybody thought that CBX could never happen, or Sentry, or some of these other initiatives. And so where does that fit into the bigger conversation as we're trying to meet the needs of our, you know, mobility goals, while at the same time thinking about the future and how do we address some of the regional opportunities that may be there in public-private partnerships and other ways of addressing that.
We have a team that looks at just those things, Chairwoman. And so I know, we did the request for innovative concepts a couple of years ago, and one of the projects was the cross-border trolley, and we're continuing to evaluate that project. That's identified as a potential public-private partnership in the plan. And we have a team that works on public-private partnerships. That includes our flexible fleet program. So innovation is something I think SANDAG's been known for a long time, and something that will carry forward into the future. You're talking to the right person. My old title used to be Director of Mobility and Innovation. So I also want to make sure that we're considering technology and those changes as we move forward. So in terms of next steps, so I mentioned we're working with your staff over the next month. We're going to the Mobility Working Group, our Sustainable Communities Working Group. We're doing one-on-one. We're going to make the adjustments that we need to make to the initial concept, then we'll start modeling it. We'll be back late spring, probably the late May, June timeframe, to share those results with you. And then the goal is this summer to have what we call a preferred network. And that preferred network then is what we would start to develop the draft plan around, what we would start to do the environmental analysis around, and then ultimately the goal is to go from draft to final by the end of 2025. So by December 2025, bring a plan to you that we can adopt and submit to the regulatory agencies that certify the plans. So with that, I've said a whole lot. I know I talk really fast, so if there's something that you would like me to go back and clarify, happy to do that. We've got this team here and the staff experts who know the projects in great detail here to answer your questions. Thanks so much for participating in this process with us. It's been a good year working with you on the regional plan.
Thank you. You're all very, very thorough. Yes, my colleagues have a lot of questions, but first we're going to go to the public and then we'll come back for our dialogue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Our first public commenter on this item, Vanessa Lopez, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Briseida Cisneros and Cristina Marquez.
Hi, good morning. My name is Vanessa and I'm a resident of City Heights who has been using public transit for 2 years now. And I'm here to ask you to accelerate the process of having electric buses available for all bus routes by 2030. I use the bus every day and I take the 7 route. But while I wait for that route to come, other buses like the 10 and the 965 pass by and they leave an awful smell of exhaust. And so I really want to focus on getting electric buses. And I haven't had the luck of riding an electric bus yet, but I do urge you to prioritize the electric infrastructure for buses in the regional plan so that we can have all buses be electric by 2030. Thank you.
Briseida Cisneros, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Cristina Marquez, then Manny Rodriguez.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Briseida Cisneros. Vivo en City Heights y utilizo el transporte público todos los días. Estoy aquí para que el plan regional incluya autobuses con el servicio cada 10 minutos. Para mí el autobús es una necesidad porque no tengo carro. Cuando voy al trabajo, me demoro 2 horas para llegar a mi destino. Por eso necesitamos que el autobús pase cada 10 minutos. Por favor, de incluir esta prioridad en el plan regional. Gracias.
Cristina
I can
Marquez.
translate for you. So she's from City Heights and she mentioned that, and I don't know where the translators are, so I'll just do it. Public transportation is very important to her and she uses the bus to get around. And so she's asking for a 10-minute wait time for buses, particularly because it takes her about 2 hours to get to her final destination. So if we can all make sure that we're taking into consideration the bus system and ensuring that it's efficient because it really impacts her ability to get to her final destination. There you go.
Respectfully adding to that, she also
Spanish?
said that she has no car and that the bus is an absolute necessity for her.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Cristina Marquez. I'm a native San Diegan and live in San Diego. I'm a member of the Electricians Union, IBEW Local 569. increasing public transit frequency, completing the blue line, building the purple line by 2035, including an all-electric people mover from the airport, is the most effective way to decrease VMTs and GHGs, and will move our region toward a more sustainable, equitable future for all San Diegans. These projects will generate good local, high road, high wage jobs for the skilled and trained. Thank you, SANDAG staff, for your hard work on these important and necessary public works projects. Together, we can move San Diego forward. Thank you.
And just for clarification, just so everybody knows, I'm going to ask public speakers if they are going to speak in a different language than English to let us know, because everybody has this apparatus in front of you, which is a translator that you can use. And so if they let us know, you can use it immediately. Entonces, para las personas que van a hablar en español, es importante nomás antes de que lleguen, que nos digan que van a hablar en español, y así le pedimos a las personas que están alrededor de la mesa que se puedan poner el aparato para las traducciones. ¿Ok? Gracias.
Manny Rodriguez, please come to the podium, followed by Corey Schumacher and Carolina Martinez.
Good morning, board members. Thank you, Antoinette and her team, for a great presentation. My name is Manny Rodriguez. I'm here on behalf of City Heights CDC and the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group. I want to take the time to uplift some of the comments and plans made by the team, particularly plans that uplift the need for better bus frequencies, plans that uplift the Youth Opportunity Pass, which has been very successful in attracting more ridership and creating a culture around public transit that will continue on as these youth turn into adults. And also the Purple Line, which is something communities in the South Bay and City Heights have been waiting decades for. People over twice my age have been hearing about the Purple Line for many times. So just to elaborate on the bus frequencies, not only will that make our public transit work better for our working class, but it is one of the most effective ways to bring everybody else to use the bus, because if it comes frequently and it's reliable, then everybody else, not just the ones who depends on it, will start using the bus. So thank you for your time, and we hope that you continue to uplift these priorities.
Corey Schumacher, please come to the podium, followed by Carolina Martinez and Rita Clement.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair Vargas and board members. My name is Corey Schumacher. I'm the political director of IBEW 569, representing 3,600 union electricians. Here today to uplift the thoughtful comments that we're giving at the last workshop. We wanted to highlight some of those that we support strongly. We are very supportive of grade separations and the double tracking of the Sprinter. Also, the grade separation along the coaster corridor, continuing with that. We're also supportive of constructing the Purple Line by 2035, constantly pursuing the airport connector and increasing mass transit options to connect all of the county, including the unincorporated areas. Regarding the mobility hubs, there was a comment that we encourage us to move forward with an equitable balance when it comes to approaching both the San Ysidro and the central mobility hubs in the RTP. San Ysidro should not be left behind. I think there's some certain things that can be done in phase one around street level improvements to help with pedestrian safety there. We continue to urge the board to stay focused on high priority transit projects that decrease the number of single occupancy vehicles on our freeways. And thank you very much for the hard work you do for the people of the county.
Carolina Martinez, please come to the podium, followed by Rita Clement and then Guadalupe Rojas.
Good morning, Carolina Martinez with the Environmental Health Coalition and the San Diego Equity Working Group. As stated in the report, in San Diego, travel times are significantly longer for transit trips than driving. This is creating transportation insecurity and increasing greenhouse gas emissions. We're here to support the report's recommendations to increase frequency for existing bus routes, continue the Youth Opportunity Pass, improve station amenities, as well as the acceleration of the Blue Line Express and the Purple Line. We are extremely grateful for the inclusion of transit priorities in the plan, and we really appreciate the format is very community accessible. Transit is a lifeline. When San Diego invests in transit, everyone benefits. Thank you.
Rita Clement, please come to the podium. You will be followed by Guadalupe Rojas and then Michael Brando.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, SANDAG board members and staff. My name is Rita Clement and I live in Chula Vista. I'm a volunteer with San Diego 350. We encourage the building of bike routes to universities, colleges, and schools, as well as the U.S.-Mexico border, with federal and state funds becoming available for transitioning to renewable energy, plus the devastating floods we saw January 22nd. Now is the time to ensure that communities of concern are not left behind as we transition away from fossil fuels. We thank you for your hard work on the 2025 Regional Transportation Plan.
Next commenter, Guadalupe Rojas, please come to the podium, followed by Michael Brando and then Truth.
Hello, everyone. My name is Guadalupe Rojas, and I am a transportation organizer with Mid-City CAN. One of my first assignments as a community advocate was to collect public input for the 2025 regional plan. Good part of the input collected came from the youth because of the Youth Opportunity Pass program, which according to SANDAG's YOP comprehensive study, it has reduced VMTs as well as carbon dioxide emissions by 4.7 million pounds. One of the suggestions that stood out to me the most came from one of our youth advocates, Ezra Skellerks, who would like to see higher frequencies during peak hours, not just for work, but school hours, because now a lot more youth are riding public transit. That is why we ask you that to prioritize increased frequencies and support programs like YOP to make public transit the best option to get around the region, since there are communities that do depend on this. Thank you so much for your time.
Michael Brando, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Truth and then Consuelo.
Just like Rosa Corey said, and behind the green mask, that when things like this come up at these meetings, there's always people stacked here to show up. All these people like Corey Schumacher, who keeps lying and saying people are attacking her. That's not the truth. I do want to compliment Manny Rodriguez.
Sir, can you please,
He said, do not interrupt
can you
me.
please focus
Do not
on the-
interrupt me.
Can you please focus on the topic at hand?
I am, and you just violated the Brown Act because this is the topic. Yeah, this is attacking, and it's great. You're attacking the people, Nora. Okay. Manny Rodriguez said that he's going to uplift the comments. Okay, I get it. Well, I'm going to condemn the comments because this is an act of omission, just like what you do at the County Board of Supervisors, Nora. What's not being talked about here, Jacktivist Shoe, and you know about this too, is things like climate adaptation and resiliency. Phrases like that are in these reports. Isn't that interesting? Because you're not talking about the geoengineering and how that's affecting the weather. And I'll talk about that on non-agenda, Nora.
Truth, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Consuelo and then Dr. Timothy Bilash.
Incentives, and you forgot de-incentives. I'm the most green person here. I drove my sustainable horse and buggy. Very muddy, but almost as rapid as public transit that Antoinette's gonna make rapid. Last time, Raquel talked about the preciousness of time. Ironically, SANDAG wastes our time with totalitarian ideas such as 3 new sales taxes, digital license plates with RFID chips, taxes on package deliveries, and taxes on rideshare. All these taxes mean it's time to throw SANDAG into the harbor. This plan was already rigged at the start because East County and Central San Diego were thrown together inequitably. Example, bus routes in La Jolla, the Purple Line trolley, and zero parking would not benefit East County. North County, no to 3 million debt holes, and Del Mar, $3 million. I support cost-benefit analysis on projects alleging GHG reduction, but what wasn't listed was the support of trolley extension into Oceanside. South County, no $2 trillion trolleys to benefit Mexico with privacy invasive biometrics. And if we eliminate SANDAG in this $162 billion regional control plan, GHGs will go way down because there's going to be less flights to DC. And by the way, the last item, Marcus, is from National City, not IB. Please fix that.
Your time expired. Our next commenter, Consuelo, please come to the podium, followed by Dr. Timothy Bilash and our first virtual commenter, Paul DeBolt.
Consuelo, native San Diegan, native Californian, and native American. Actually, when San Diego invests in the people, there is no need for investment in transit. And Nora, I am genuinely doing the work of the people, unlike you, informing the people of who's to blame for our counties being more, concerned with being federally compliant instead of what's happening here in our backyard. Truth always surfaces. People's lives are becoming harder, and the majority of these local county officials are to blame. So you're welcome, because yes, your name is a bit more out there now and is known to those 21 people as Nora, the corrupt county chair. So again, you're so very welcome.
Dr. Bilash, please come to the podium. Followed by the first of 10 final virtual commenters, Paul the Bold, and then Mary D.
Good morning, SANDAG board members and the public. My name is Dr. Timothy Daniel Bilash. I live in Del Mar in San Diego City, and I am a current candidate for public office. First, I want to thank the SANDAG staff and members and contributors for all, because they're asked to be all things to all people at all times. I want to concentrate on the overview draft and make some lists of the graphic that was presented. It seems that SANDAG is shifting to emphasize north-south transit rather than east-west, which I think is an important component of climate and pollution. The comment was made about east-west corridors not being cost-effective. I would really like to see more on that, and concentration to the pass-throughs of cars rather than coming to the city. Particulate matter in climate, financial cost policy, delays in that, increase, new technology, undercarriage charging, and if SANDAG had some guidance on Proposition
Your
1,
time has expired.
an update on Otay Mesa
next
East
commenter
security needs.
Is our first virtual commenter, Paul the Bold, who will be followed by Mary D, then Corina Contreras. Paul the Bold, please go ahead.
If we all listen to each other respectfully, and I mean everyone here, we can do this. For the eroding Del Mar Bluff realignment, Mother Nature will set the schedule. How much money, time, resources, and maybe lives do you want to waste on keeping the tracks in Del Mar instead of creative solutions like rebuilding up the I-15 corridor? Or maybe it's easier to go through the Duluth area when you get above Escondido. You should consider rapid ferry service Trans-Bay from Imperial Beach to Oceanside. You don't need to increase transit options to the You do need to increase transit options to the unincorporated areas. The map at the workshop I went to didn't even have East County, which is not good. The whole county needs to work together. More mobility hubs might be an answer. Cost benefit should not apply everywhere.
Your time expired. Our next commenter, Mary D, followed by Corina Contreras and Ariana Mid-City Can. Mary D, please go ahead.
Hi, first, no new taxes and no to the backdoor shenanigans for getting your hands on new taxes passed at lower thresholds by throwing PLAs and contracts to those who help you. Secondly, after learning that the Borders Committee isn't just for Mexico, but all geographical borders that abut our county, I'm wondering why we're not talking about a new line up to Temecula and connecting even up to Riverside for all the bedroom community commuters. This seems like it would not only take a lot of commuting traffic off of I-15, but would also help with the housing demands and affordability in our county, allowing people without cars to live farther away and far more affordably. We keep hearing a lot of talk about the Purple Line and the trolley into Mexico, but we need to focus on this side of the border. So before any trolley into Mexico, please consider adding a Chardonnay line to Riverside County with possible terminus in Rancho Cucamonga for the new Las Vegas rail. Thank you.
Corina Contreras will be followed by Ariana and then Kenya Zamaripa. Corina, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Corina Contreras and my capacity as Transportation Policy Advocate for Climate Action Campaign. First, I have to say that freeway widening is highly inappropriate. It will make it harder for this plan to meet state mandates and make it very easy to achieve utter failure. If we fail, we lose millions, if not billions of dollars in matching state and federal funds, including funds that all our communities rely on for fixing our roads. We need and deserve the political will to advocate for more frequency for mass transit, for bus rapid transit in all parts of the region, especially in cities like Escondido, where 30% of the residents do not have access to a vehicle. We need more rail connections, grade separation, completion of the purple line, immediate completion of phase 1 of the San Ysidro mobility hub, because for thousands of pedestrians for too long, this has gone overlooked. We need an APM connection to the airport where the APM would not impede with the current trolley. We need a permanent YOP. Please make the connection between public health, climate change, and safety, and push for a plan that brings prosperity.
Your time expired. Our next commenter, Ariana, followed by Kenya, and the original draw. Ariana, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Ariana with Mid-City CAN. Good morning, board members. Thank you to staff, SANDAG staff, and community members for their hard work on the initial concepts. Our Mid-City CAN team focused on community outreach and feedback this past summer, and this plan took into consideration many viewpoints. Our team engaged with folks in community events, schools, and places like apartment complexes. We heard many stories about how people get around, and we think it's important to provide good transportation options that are able to meet people's needs in the region while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The plan includes transportation options and the Youth Opportunity Pass as strategies to reduce emissions and increase transportation options. We do appreciate that SANDAG is looking at funding more transit amenities because it is important for folks, especially for seniors and folks with living with disabilities. I thank you for your time and thank you for including 10 transit lifelines.
Kenya will be followed by the original draw and then Greg. Kenya, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you again. Kenya Samaripa, Vice President of International and Public Affairs at the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce, is calling in strong support for the binational trolley connection. We've conveyed our support in the past. This project will help provide an additional opportunity for our community to commute across the border and facilitate travel for over 120,000 people crossing through San Ysidro at the land port of entry alone every single day, a number that would only continue to increase with population growth and a number of youth citizens moving to Tijuana in search of affordable housing. So this is our binational region and communities, an urgent need for an increased connectivity across the region, and the project will additionally reduce the amount of vehicles in highways and lessen the congestion and currently experienced at land ports of entry, with people waiting up to 3 to 5 hours, both by car or standing in line, sometimes under heavy rain, just like we experienced this morning. So thank you again for your work and leadership in advancing this project.
The original draw will be followed by Greg and then Blair Beekman. Please go ahead.
CO2 in the atmosphere is 0.04%. People contribute 3% to that. You guys are trying to get rid of people because you can't reduce carbon and not get rid of the human life. 139 to 162 billion, fat chance. You're never going to get that because of the way that the economy is going and everything is going to shit. And the fact that you think that any of this is going to go through, it's kind of funny because you're going to severely impede transit with these lithium bombs and or, kill people with them when you're doing this EV transportation. But the good news is that you guys fail miserably at everything that you do across the board. Like everything. I mean, you can't even keep up the infrastructure for people to not, having disasters happen when a storm comes. That's the good news, because that means that you're not going to be able to complete any of these tasks the way that you want, and you'll fail miserably at trying to accomplish it. And that is so promising because it's a guarantee, because everything you do, you fail at. So it's good news.
Your time expired. Greg will be followed by the final 4 commenters, Blair Beekman, BPP, Susan Dwerksen, and Paul the Bold. Greg, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Greg, and I'm a resident of Mission Valley. I appreciate the work that has gone into the 2025 plan as a first step to reduce VMTs and GHGs. And I fully agree with the pro-public transit and pro-biking comments from other members of the public that have preceded me. I'd like to focus specifically on the estimated 200 miles of freeway expansions in this plan. Countless studies have shown that roadway expansion induces further traffic demand and miles driven, which can actually lead to even longer transit times. Additionally, this will dig the hole deeper for meeting more stringent VMT and GHG requirements that will invariably come from both federal and state governments in the future. In my opinion, there needs to be a total elimination of freeway widening from this plan, and that funding should be allocated towards public transit and bicycle infrastructure. The main goal of SANDAG should be to make these forms of transit accessible, safe, and time competitive with driving, especially in the north-south corridors as mentioned. Rapid lines and managed lanes should be implemented through conversion of existing roadways. In addition to reducing VMTs and GHGs, these modes of transit also have lower maintenance and operation costs and would symbiotically reduce maintenance costs on existing roadways by
Your time expired. And for a correction, our final three commenters will be Blair Beekman, BPP, and Susan Dorkson. Blair, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Nice previous public comment. Thank you. For myself, first, thank you. And was first mentioned in the presentation on bus time issues. I take the 3 bus a lot and live right next to the 3. And thank you that you the time, it used to be every 15 minutes, now down to every 12 minutes. That's a good success story, I think. It's a good way to practice. And there was other commenters today asking about that for their bus lines. Good luck how the Route 3 can be a good example in San Diego for the future of how to do that. I also wanted to comment, you talked about complete streets, you talked about border issues. All of those sort of items are going to have a lot of technology involved, and with a lot of new technology that we don't quite know how to talk about yet openly. You really have to learn how to talk openly about the future of all the new tech that's going to be used. We have to learn to combine not only the inventiveness of tech, but the civil rights and civil protections of tech.
Your time expired. Our next commenter, BPP, will be followed by final commenter, Susan. BPP, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Carey. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership. We want to extend our greetings to Chair Vargas and the other members of the SANDAG Board of Directors. We appreciate your leadership in our community. Today, I want to speak to the SANDAG Regional Plan update and thank you for your efforts in this area. Specifically, we want to provide our support to the cross-border trolley concept that is now known as the Binational Trolley Connection. This is included in your U.S.-Mexico Border Transit Connection and is very important to our region. We are a binational region. Our local economy, binational relations, border wait times, and families and communities are in desperate need of this addition to our dynamic region, and we encourage your support. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with all of you today, and thank you for your service to our community.
Susan, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Susan Dirksen. I'm a retiree and a volunteer with San Diego 350. I agree with a lot of the comments today. I want to focus on some of the budgetary questions. As you consider the hard decisions ahead on the budget for this plan, please keep in mind that any spending that lowers greenhouse gas emissions is actually a savings. And we've seen a tiny taste of that in the last couple of weeks with the destruction that the climate crisis has brought already and is going to get much worse. So electric vehicles are a very important step, but we really have to lower the use of private vehicles. We don't need to expand roadways. We need a comprehensive, affordable, equitable, convenient, and comfortable transit system. And that includes many of the things that other people have talked about today, and reduced fares wherever possible. Any spending on this is for the good of all of us. Thank you very much.
And that concludes the public comments on this item.
All right. So feel free to grab lunch. I'm going to just go ahead and go through the discussion so that we can meet our time. So the first person is our second vice chair.
Thank you. And thank you so much to staff for all the work that you've put into this and for really listening to us. I think that's wonderful. Something that I didn't hear mentioned was the phrase mobility hubs. It was one of the 5 big moves that were in the original 2021 RTP. And I was very ambiguous at best about mobility hubs for a number of reasons. Number one, they're still not defined either as to what the heck they are or what their boundaries are. And I know that none of our cities were ever consulted as to what those boundaries are. In terms of if there's something you had to do with transportation, well, like if that's where transportation options would be located, well, we all know we can get an Uber anywhere. So that didn't make a lot of sense. And now we've got the little dotted areas that are the flexible fleets, whether one or the two different vehicles. The other thing is the dense housing is supposedly in the plan supposed to go in our mobility hubs. Yet it didn't align with in my city where our housing element has identified the units to be in our arena. So they didn't make any sense to me. And I feel quite vulnerable that all of us have a mobility hub that we haven't had any say in, and that it could be the topic of some legislation that would force ministerial approvals in a certain area. So I'm hoping that they're out of here. Is that the case, that we don't have mobility hubs anymore? I mean, I get San Ysidro and Central, that could be a little different, but.
Yes, I think there was a lot of confusion around mobility hubs, what they were, they were intended to be, and I think I shared this with you. The areas where we had the highest concentration of transportation improvements, right? Where we had our high frequency transit stations, good connections, safe connections to those flexible fleet service areas. But there was certainly a lot of confusion around whether they were one single development, entire communities. So you don't see them here. We are going to be, I should have mentioned, we don't have a land use discussion today. We're going to be coming back to you in the spring with the sub-regional forecast. So you had a presentation on the regional forecast. We'll talk about the sub-regional forecast. We're not proposing to do a separate land use scenario. We want to be consistent with the sub-regional forecast. That will be an option, though, that you have if we don't meet the target, is if you want to have some type of a land use scenario that's more aggressive than the sub-regional forecast. But that's not something that we're going to assume that we need upfront.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that very much. And then in terms of a new policy idea, are signal synchronization a possibility? Because I know in our city, that's where a lot of backup comes and idling and congestion, et cetera.
Yes, that's also not reflected on the map, but smart intersections is in that transportation technology policy and program area that I presented today. Pretty much all of the signals on the regional arterials are intended to be, synchronized so that we can improve traffic flow between cities and within cities.
And with Caltrans, right?
Yes.
That's our particular issue, and I think we're not alone in that.
The ramp meters are also part of that, so.
Okay, excellent. Those conclude my comments, and I appreciate all of the work. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Molina.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. For the record, I'm Council Member Molina for this year. Thank you for the City of National City. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. This is exciting. I think it's wonderful that we're seeing the culmination of the workshops and the discussions that we've had at our little tables when we move over to the other room. I think that's an excellent way to communicate. And I do hope that we do continue to have conversations, not just around the board of directors table where there is process on how to speak, but, just having a conversation, I think, and I do feel heard. I appreciate your slide number 5 included a health policy group. I think that is key. I mean, I do believe any improvement towards better transportation will translate to improvements in health outcomes in general. And I think you also mentioned, this health group will also include promotion of physical activity. I mean, I think, it makes sense to me. I don't know why, perhaps, I don't know, some naysayers wouldn't go for that. But I do want to commend the purple line. I think I heard you say, Antoinette, the 2035 timing of that is not going to be possible. Do we have an idea for when after that?
So it's definitely not possible by 2035. There was funding approved in the budget amendment to continue with the planning. So we are going as quickly as possible. But keep in mind that this was intended to be a grade separated project. So from an engineering standpoint, it's complicated and will take some time to get through engineering and design of that project. So I think it's probably, more likely closer to the 2050 timeframe when that project would be completely constructed. But there is the option to perhaps construct it in phases so that you would see segments of the purple line coming online sooner
Okay, thank you. I may not be in public office in 2050, but I do support the purple line. There are issues, I just trying to figure it out in my head, and I'm not an engineer. How the purple line will go through National City is a little bit concerning, but I'm absolutely excited about a purple line. And, I don't have to tell you, the blue line existing today is crucial to this area. There is large ridership on the blue line. I have every confidence that the purple line would be just as successful.
I should
do
have
want
mentioned,
to-
I'm sorry, we do have in the interim a rapid project proposed that would cover the same communities because we know people don't want to wait that long and we want you to have it while you're still in office. So
thank you.
there is a rapid proposed to serve those communities.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The comments about the electric buses, I realize perhaps this is for an agency such as MTS, but I do have concerns with many times I do hear, these buses are empty. And however, we still continue to have those two buses, the double bus with the connection in the middle. And I just sort of wonder, hasn't somebody thought about making these buses more efficient by making them perhaps smaller, not these huge buses that just don't have the ridership. But I do appreciate the focus on that electric buses and improving bus frequencies. And the last thing I will mention is the importance of those cross-border connections. And I appreciate all the focus that you have given to that. And certainly the speakers that have mentioned it as well. It is crucial for our area. I absolutely express support for the little dot on this map for the South County, which is the little dot number 12. Hopefully it moves further south because I think it would be wonderful to take it away from such a busy area and allow for some sort of partnership where it is easier to get from one region to the other across a very important border. I do support this, and this is a binational trolley connection. Inclusion of this in the 2025 plan is a concept that is key for the region as a whole, not just for South County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I had a couple of questions and then a couple of accolades. I guess that would be for staff. I really do appreciate how you've listened, and Antoinette specifically, we've had a lot of conversations. I really appreciate your hard work. I do want to just bring just some highlight to a few things. The flexible fleets and microtransit in cities like mine that have, a lot of students coming in, and to Second Vice Chair Hebner's discussion about smart lights. When you've got microtransit, you have a lot of students coming in. I think for cities like mine, it would be very beneficial. And then there's also the discussion about the bus routes near schools. I think many of us don't have school buses anymore, so getting the kids to school really adds the traffic and the idling and all of that. And then also adding lanes to and no general purpose lane conversions on the 78. I like that you've listened to that. And then, though I did want to talk a little bit about the I-5 78 connector project. It's actually both connectors and then also the HOV lanes. I think that should be possibly changed. And to something that I brought up a little bit earlier, we still have flooding issues on the 78. And I really appreciate the feedback on that and the update on that, Alan. But also, just what stormwater issues that creates. I think we need to look at that entire corridor as something a little bit more than we've actually been talking about in Transnet. And then also, we need to get the information on the managed lanes and the initial concepts on that. One of the things that I would like to ask for pretty early on, if possible, would be the regional plan glossary, because it really gives more detail. It's a 50-page document for anyone that might not have read that. It's really important so we know exactly what it is that we're talking about, because I know when we talk about managed lanes, for instance, and carpool lanes, what we're talking about and what has been brought up in the recent years is very different than what we approved actually in the 21 plan. So I think having that information is really important to have that as soon as we get that. And then also wanted to talk a little bit about funding of this. And so this might be for you, Susan. So I noticed in the last agenda that we had that we didn't really go over publicly, on page 133, under the revenue summary, it talks about a statewide 0.25% sales tax for transportation. I think that's new, but I'm not sure if that's new or it's existing, but I don't think it's existing.
Sure. Can you tell me the name of the revenue source?
It says TDA, Transportation Development Act.
that's
Is
an
that something that
existing.
we already have?
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, just wanted to double check on that. I didn't know if it was a new TDA. I know we have TDA, I just wasn't sure. But then it also talks just above that on the line above it, it talks about and this is what we're counting as funding that we believe that we will have. It talks about a renewal of Transnet, which, and so would that be a renewal that would be, that would have a sunset clause as in it would end at some point in time? Or would that be for forever?
So that's an
that we're talking
extension of the current Transnet ordinance. So what the plan assumes is between now and 2048, there will be an extension of that half-cent sales tax. So we've included the revenue of that half-cent, where right now it's due to sunset in 2048. We've included that half-cent sales tax revenue in 2049 and 2050.
Okay, so I guess my point is it for a finite amount of time like the current Transnet, or would it go forever?
Well,
Sorry,
that's an assumption that's beyond the end of the plan. The assumption that we made here is that it will be at least till 2050.
Okay, all right. And then on the next page on 133, it also talks about 2 new sales tax measures that SANDAG would be putting on. We're predicting 2028 and then also 2032. So that would be, I'm just trying to get, and there is a citizens initiative for this year. So let's just leave that out of it for now. Let's assume that happens because that's part of the plan also for the funding. But then we're talking about 2 new sales tax measures in 28 and 32, and the extension of what we currently have in Transnet that we haven't even delivered on, just for a reminder for everyone. So we're talking about 3 new sales taxes plus a citizens initiative that would be happening. And I guess my question is, this is it's pretty rich on the back of taxpayers. I mean, it's a 66%, I think, or 60% of it would need to be generated here locally. That's a lot of money. And I'm just wondering if we have looked at value engineering yet, because this is, this kind of goes to the point of, are we trying to buy Nordstrom clothing when we can really only afford Walmart? That's how I always tell my staff, hey, it's great if we have, Walmart service. That's what it costs, but we want people to feel like it's Nordstrom. So I'm wondering, is this Nordstrom and we really want it? We really can only afford Walmart. Because, if you look around at many of my residents are having a hard time putting food on their table. I hear it time and time again, and it's only getting worse. And so I guess my question is, have we thought about a value engineering sort of thing when we're bringing this plan to the board next year?
So Mayor Jones, if I could just clarify that there are only 2 future regional sales tax measures, 2 new, the one in 2028 and the one in 2032. We did not make assumptions regarding the citizens initiative that's on the ballot this year. So we did not assume that was going to happen. We assumed that our next sales tax measure would be in 2028. If that measure happens to pass, then we could advance the funds in the plan that are currently sitting in 2029 following that election. We could move that money forward. But the reason that we did that was to be a little bit more constrained. We don't want the money in the near term so that we then get started on projects. If we have to go back, if we add the money now and it doesn't pass, then there's a big risk for
being able to fund all the projects. So we do not assume anything about a citizens initiative in the revenue plan here. We have a half-cent sales tax in 2028, a half-cent sales tax in 2032 for the region. We had assumed in the prior plan that those sales tax measures would happen sooner. So we have actually pushed them out to give us more time.
Okay, so it would be 2 new sales taxes, including the Citizens Initiative for this year and the extension of Transnet before it has a sunset.
So
Correct?
there's 2 new regional
then
sales
one
tax
extension.
measures, an extension.
Yes.
And the next line under future local revenues is a future MTS local revenue. And
Right.
that's a sales tax measure for their jurisdiction. So I just want to be clear about what's
No,
all
that's
in there.
okay. That's good because, you know, reading through, I thought that I had read somewhere that the Citizens Initiative was part of it. And I couldn't find it a second time. So that
No,
might have been just something I had read maybe in the 21 plan because I do read a lot of things. So I might have had that confused in my head. So yes.
Yes.
So just to clarify, remember that we have to put together a revenue scenario that can be accepted by the federal government. And we base that revenue scenario on things that the federal government and state government have accepted before and a look kind of at our past history. I think a really important point that I hope came through in what Susan said, what we assume in the first 5 years is really important because that's the closest to implementation. And then we make some assumptions about out to the future, but there'll be future board decisions. That's why we update these plans every 4 years. So within that first 5-year time frame, so between 2025 and 2030, which is when you would adopt your next plan, there is an assumption about 1 new half-cent sales tax. So just to keep in mind that so what we're really trying to do for you all here is put together what we think is a reasonable assumption about future revenues. And albeit some of it is conservative, as Susan is saying, and we've put things in later years. So we're not making an assumption that we're going to have this flood of money 2 years from now when we promise all these projects that we can't deliver on. So that's really how it's all scheduled out. And then looking at what we can fund when. That value engineering that you're talking about happens more at the project level. So we come up with very large, high level assumptions about what these things would cost. When it gets down to it, there might be something right now we think is a rapid bus, but maybe it makes more sense that that's rail because of ridership. That can happen with other aspects too. So I think just that point about the assumption in the first 5 years is what's important because you'll get to revisit all of these other things probably 3 or 4 more times before we get to 2050.
Got it. And then I had just one other thing. So Antoinette, and thank you for listening because I've talked about this a lot. The BRT from Riverside to San Diego. I've talked because that was on our update. I think it was the last meeting. I have to tell you, the folks at CSU, San Marcos, Palomar Hospital, and then also Kaiser Permanente, brand new hospital in San Marcos, very excited about having that. We have so many of their folks living up in Southern Riverside, and to get this to actually happen, I know one of the speakers had brought this up. The good thing is it's something we can do fairly quickly because the expense is not the same as rail, but it will provide relief quickly, which is a big deal. So anyway, really appreciate your efforts on that and that you listened. Thank you. And responded to. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Campillo?
No. Oh,
was it you? I'm sorry, I always get confused because I think that when the first vice chair leaves, you become A. So anyway, right? I don't know. It's weird. Go
I
ahead.
don't know either.
Sorry.
We're trying to figure it
Got
out,
you.
but
I'm glad you're here. Go ahead, Councilmember Moreno.
thank you. My comments will be quick. First of all, thank you for the presentation and for the exercise we had last a week ago. We were able to give our input, and so I thank you for that. I do have one correction to the attachment 1. My comment regarding what the document calls reversible lanes on the 805 was a little bit more substantial than that. It concerned both the Interstate 5 and the 805. And I called for staff to explore possible contraflow options on both freeways to address morning and afternoon congestion. This could include exploring using the far left lane of the southbound 5 and 805 as a northbound express lane in the morning, and the far left lane to the northbound 5 and 805 as a southbound express lane in the afternoon. This could go a long way to mitigate traffic delay during rush hours in the South Bay. I also mentioned at the last meeting the 125 and also the San Isidro hub as being, in my opinion, the most important hub that we have. And it's not my opinion, the ridership shows it, the data shows it. And so I look forward to seeing this feedback and the feedback that was incorporated in the 2025 regional plan. But that concludes my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Maxon. Did I pronounce your name right? Maxon?
It's like Johnson, it's Maxon, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Looking at what you have presented today, I see a lot of terms.
Could you move the mic closer to you? I can't hear you. Thank you.
I see a lot of terms describing what we've seen and what we're considering. And some of these items say that you're prioritizing them, you're funding them, you're continuing. The ones that are important to the unincorporated area say exploring or planning for future. So I had two questions for you. What is the priority for wildfire evacuation improvements? Because it's under exploring. And then regarding the greenhouse gas reduction goal for 2035 and the use of reduced VMTs to meet that goal, the unincorporated area has a new generation of youth who have not yet developed a driving habit. The use of microtransit and reasonable bus routes and times, if they're implemented within the next year or two, is an opportunity to redirect these future drivers into greenhouse gas friendly travel modes. How soon will those options be made available? And right now, those are under the planning designation versus continuing.
So I know for SR 67 in particular, the environmental analysis is underway. So there'll be recommendations coming back to this board at some time in the future. Alan probably knows a little bit more about the schedule than I do. But planning for the express bus route that's in the initial concept is starting right away. Actually, that was included in the budget amendment that the board adopted last fall. So that planning for that particular bus route, which will connect Ramona into the regional transit network, we'll be starting soon, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver that project pretty quickly.
Ms. Burkholder.
And you skip me so I can finish.
Sure. Deputy Mayor Melendez.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I think you're gathering a lot of communications over many, many meetings, and it's clear that the plan is, being formed by many unique perspectives, and you're balancing our regulatory requirements and the technical possibilities within our region. So I do really appreciate this overview. I also appreciate Vice Chair Huebner's comments about inconsistencies when it comes to planned housing development in this plan. And I believe that land use should be highly impactful as we're developing this plan. I'm glad to know that that's going to be coming back to us. I was interested to hear that we get better ridership with rapid projects. Could you explain that a little bit more? I'd love to understand that better.
So from a policy standpoint, when you make transit fast and frequent, you get more ridership because it's a more convenient and competitive option for people. So when we model it, the ridership goes up when we increase the frequencies, like 10 minutes, 15-minute frequencies.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm very supportive of rapid projects in Vista and North County. We have a lot of working people and poor people who do not have a vehicle. They do not have a car to depend on. They have to depend on public transportation. And I'm concerned that we're building a regional plan that will get people stuck and keep them from being able to access economic opportunities. I really do think that we need to expand rapid bus services and rail services throughout North County and connect us more to the opportunities here in San Diego. I think that this plan still forces working and poor people to depend on a vehicle to get around and doesn't give them the economic and physical mobility to move throughout the region without being forced to pay for a car. And with the highest rates of delinquencies in auto loans that we've seen in history over recent months, I am concerned that we're developing a plan that is not economically resilient, that is not going to support working people and ensure that they can get to where they need to go without a high burden of costs to their families. And when we talk about funding this plan, I agree it's really high cost to our local revenues. I think that we need to develop some equitable solutions when it comes to local revenues. Some of the largest users of our roads are going to be heavy and excessive delivery trucks and delivering services that are not really concerned with the capacity and the weight of our roads. I know that in my local community, we're having excessively heavy delivery trucks eating up our roads. This is coming from companies like Amazon and many others that are causing a huge burden on our system. And I think that we need to consider where we're going to cover the costs of our roads in the future as we continue to expand. The cost of that maintenance is going to continue to be a burden on us. And I don't think that it should fall on the back of working poor people who are barely able to cover their car payment, right? We're in a position right now where if people can afford a car, there's high levels of loan delinquencies, and it's just not a sustainable option for a lot of people. In addition to that, when we move away from the regional conversation, we come closer into the center of home. In my community in Vista, we're really working to connect our residents to multimodal opportunities. We're putting out integrated and protected bike lane systems throughout our city. For the first time in our city's history, we're seeing investment of active transportation for our community so that they have the built environment that they need to be able to go out and move freely throughout the community. And we really want support in that, whether that's bus connections, rapid bus connections to some of our job centers, or active transportation corridor improvements like Emerald Drive Complete Streets project. We have a network within Vista we're trying to make more robust for the residents there. So we're trying to do our part locally within our city, but when it comes to connecting our residents from Vista to the opportunities along the coast and down here into San Diego, you know, it's just really not meeting people's needs. And I want to say that some of the solutions that are presented in this plan are going to be sufficient, you know, but I'm concerned that they're not. And that ultimately the people who are going to be impacted are poor working people who have to get up and go to work every day and commute to their jobs and have a really challenged experience where they're funding the brunt of this plan in their taxes. They're funding the cost of their transportation and their personal vehicles. They're not able to sustain these costs for their families. So if we're able to invest in a local built environment that gives people some relief, I think that that would be very powerful. And I also want to see us actually make some very impressive advancements for our community as it grows. So that's why I'm really looking forward to the housing discussion. Our community is going to continue to grow. I think that there's one of the speakers today made a comment regarding transportation insecurity. that there's a lot of young and working people facing transportation insecurity. I don't think that this plan connects people in the way that gives them the security of being able to move freely. And I see it in my community too, that young people are just not driving. They're not learning how to drive, you know, they're not having that experience. They're having a different experience. Overwhelmingly, the younger and younger generations are choosing not to drive, or that they can't afford it. They can't afford a car. And, you know, I don't see their economic situation improving anytime soon. So how are we going to build for them? I think I'm probably the youngest person on this board, so I have to represent the youth. You know, my mom tells me I'm an old soul, but young people, you know, I'm concerned that we're not building for them. And I think our local built environment and our long-term transportation vision really needs to meet the need of young people. So I'm looking forward to having more conversations with SANDAG staff. I think NEVs and EVs are really going to be impactful for our community. They're going to give us a taste of what is it like to have micromobility? What is it like to move a little bit more sustainably? We haven't experienced that. I think once we do experience it, we're going to see, oh, okay, it'll open up our minds to all sorts of different types of programs, right? Once we have access to some of these others, I'd love to make sure that we can get a pilot program for that in Vista. You know, ongoing conversations, I think, you know, we might not always agree, but I do appreciate that there's a number of projects on here that are really connecting people in a meaningful way. I'm just concerned that the brunt of the cost is really falling on working people. And what would it look like if we had a little bit more corporate responsibility?
Councilmember,
some of the burden.
I think that, you know, it's really important. And I think one of the committees where a lot of that discussion is taking, I'm looking at Councilmember Moreno, because that is exactly the conversations that are happening in the equity discussion, right? This is why we adopted the equity plan. And what we're doing right now, and as we're building a regional plan, we have to remember that this board didn't look like what it looks like now for many, many years. It took 11 years at least for even the item of the no-cost transportation for our youth, right? The community had been fighting for that forever, brought it up in the County of San Diego, and then it was brought up here with the council members and the first vice chair. He was actually part of that work. And so I think that's the role that we're going to play. And I would encourage you to continue to meet with staff so that perspective is always at the forefront. So anything else?
Thank you. I don't mean to minimize any of the progress that we have made. I know that there's been significant strides. I'm just concerned that we're not meeting people's transportation needs and we're forcing them to be dependent on a system that's not sustainable.
Yeah, and
for
if
their
you have
economic
thoughts or
well-being.
ideas, I think this is, you know, part of this is also make the recommendations, right? So as we're moving forward, which is what you did today. So you're good? Okay. Councilmember Burkholder, you good?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that. Mouthful of turkey. I just have two questions, Antoinette. Thank you. I wanted to also just compliment you. I've gotten some really fabulous feedback from my staff about how you're working together. I think, because you talk so fast, I think I heard you say that you'll be meeting with our staff in the next month and then bring back some feedback from that. Will you be discussing not only the transportation, but the land use as well? Or is that a separate time?
Yeah, so the land use discussion is happening with the Sustainable Communities Working Group and Mobility, I think in March. Oh, sorry, February is what I'm hearing from my team. So this month we'll be having those discussions and it'll come to the board in March.
Okay, great. I just, I mean, we appreciate the work that you're trying to do. I think you're in the right direction for the city of Carlsbad. If the council member from Vista would like some of our MTS buses, they are literally empty most of the time. However, I don't know that would fix the weight on the roads because they do tear up our roads. But anyway, I think it's a good approach. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Gasolin.
Great, thank you. I have 3 comments and a question. So the first comment is, in the North County coastal or the North County discussion, one of our recommendations is that we really would like to get some level of estimated cost for each of the different items that are on our menu here. Being able to balance the greenhouse gas benefit and the effectiveness with metrics, for example, decreasing the time to destination on average with the cost to implement. If we have two different ways to do something and one will cost 3 times as much as the other and they'll have the same greenhouse gas reduction, then having those costs will help us. And I heard Mayor Jones from San Marcos ask for this, and I'm basically saying the same thing again to emphasize. What I notice in our menu is that numbers 43 through 113, so this is a total of 64 buses and 5 streetcars and trolleys, are really buses and a few streetcars and trolleys. This is fantastic because these are rapid buses, they're local buses, and just highlighting what's really good for Del Mar, Solana Beach, up to Oceanside are the Rapid 473, Oceanside to Solana Beach to UTC and UC San Diego. That's a game changer. And then the Rapid 474 from Oceanside to Vista. That's also a game changer because it starts to interconnect our North County cities. And the local Route 89, Solana Beach to UTC on top of the Rapid. This is smart thinking. It really is. And I wanted to emphasize this because these 64 bus routes that are on here are so important to so many. And it's not just those of us who have given up a car or can't buy a car, but everybody. So my next comment, that was number 2. Next comment is I wanted to highlight what I heard. Electric buses by 2030 and better bus frequencies. So I'll speak from experience. When I moved to New York City to become a junior faculty member at a university there, I was living in university housing and it was about 25 blocks to walk. It was about 35 minutes walking. But if it were raining, and in New York City, it's raining about 2 days out of 3, I'd just walk out to the corner and quick, get on the 65 bus. And about 10 to 12 minutes later, I'd be at work. And worst case scenario was 5 to 10 minutes waiting. I knew I could walk out and the bus would be there. I didn't have to plan. I didn't have to think ahead. And when I was heading downtown to go take my Kung Fu class so that I could just get all my anxieties out about being a tenure track faculty, I just went over to the 456 subway, a 15-minute walk, and then the train would come. So that rapid frequency makes all the difference. And once you do start using public transit, I think Councilman Deputy Mayor Burkholder said this, you like it, you want it, and it feels good to take it. So that said, I'd like to see us think about taking our youth pass and each year adding a year to it. Right now it's 18 and under. Let's make it 19 and under and then 20 and under up to 25 so that we have all of our regional college students and students pursuing master's degrees also able to take it. I know that all of the students at UCSD rely heavily on the buses because parking is so onerous at this point. So those are my 3 comments. And I think it'd be really interesting to look at number 50 through 113 and know what are the costs for just these bus line, trolley, and streetcar increases. Let's get that nailed down. My question. So this is for Susan Huntington, and I'm going to address it to Ray Major because I think so I want to ask you to check my math, basically. So what I heard is $107 billion of local cost estimated. That was the higher end. And so we have 3.3 million people in 2023 in the San Diego County. And we have had 1.131 million households in 2020. So if we do the math and divide, that's $33,000 per person, and that's $95,000 per household. So my question number 1 is, did I get the math right? I think I did. And question number 2 is, how many years does that represent for this RTP 2025?
Go ahead. Well, you did the math correctly, and it's over the time period from 2025 through 2050. So it's 25-year period.
So about $100,000 over a 25-year period per household in the San Diego County. So I really think we do need to prioritize, and we need these estimated costs, because that's a lot of money. And we may or may not get these things done. And these bus routes, they sing to me. Thank you.
Mayor Minto.
That's a lot of money over 25 years or so. My first home didn't cost me that much money, and I amortized it over 30. So anyways, what I like to say is, of course, the most important region is obviously the city of San Diego, South Bay, North County, and East County. Depends on who you talk to, which one comes first, though. You know, I think that we hear from people from the community, and many of the times they sound very angry, very disenfranchised even. And so I think that maybe we could start trying to even address some of the questions, the comments, the concerns in maybe a little bit better way, because we hear the same questions and concerns over and over again. One of the things I hear about all the time is funding and the funding of transportation. We always talked about transportation funds coming in, come from the federal government, the state government, come down to the metropolitan planning organizations. Something that we should probably also do, because we talk so much about the reason to change and address transportation needs because of the environmental issues that they cause. Well, are we getting money from any environmental agency to help us with our transportation needs because we're cleaning up the environment so that they can actually do something or say it's better or whatever, instead of just issuing orders to do things? And then we also talk about, and Katie, you talked a lot about this, you know, economic development and people getting to work, getting jobs and things. So are we talking to the Economic Development Agency and asking for funding from them and maybe planning that out over time? I know that our county comprehensive economic development strategy, which probably nobody has heard about in this county, probably more people know about NORA than they do about that plan. They actually give a lot of money for brick and mortar type of issues. And that way people can get to and from work in an efficient manner. If we have torn up streets and roads, they might be able to help out some of our local communities, our county, on getting some of those needs met. My concern about putting heavier vehicles on the roadway with these EV cars and trucks, I mean, especially the big trucks, is that they're going to tear up our streets even more over time. And I know that since we've had a larger number of EV vehicles put into our community, our streets actually are deteriorating faster. So what's going to happen when we put the bigger trucks there? So are we going to be able to somehow be able to get money into our communities so that we can repair those roads? And then aren't we going to actually, by tearing up those roads more, put more particulates in the air, because now we're going to be heating more tar and oil and asphalt and things of that nature, or even if it's a concrete road, then that's going to also have an effect on the environment. So sometimes I think that by trying to make it so that we try and please one group, and what happens is we didn't really do a very good job of planning ahead. So therefore, we don't plan to fail, we just simply fail to plan sometimes. And so as far as the issues that Mayor Jones brought up about, future taxation. We pay an awful lot of taxes already. So that's why I mentioned going after not just transportation dollars, but environmental dollars, economic development dollars. And then we need to think also more about expanding our, the way we look at our areas around roads and see how we can plan ahead for disasters like the 78 that's flooded and some of the other places. Because I can tell you that even in the municipalities, though we do our best, we don't always get every culvert clean. We don't get every natural culverts even cleaned. And so what they create is some earthen dams that actually do fail and cause floods, like along University Avenue in the city of San Diego, at Aragon Street where the Joan Kroc Center is. I know 20 years ago, almost the day, there was a flood, exact same kind of flood that was happened on the 22nd in that exact spot. And the reason why I know that is because I was hit by a flash flood on that street. So I'm lucky to be here today. Not that you guys aren't doing a good job, but the bottom line is that city councils in the county in this region have a lot of new people. A lot of new people that are able to start talking about better funding, better ways of taking care of their infrastructure needs. And you know what? So that it doesn't have such a negative impact on the people that have been there for so long and those people that will be coming after. So yeah, the most important region in our county is South Bay, City of San Diego, North County, and East County.
About covers it. Thank you, Councilmember. We have, just so you know, 5 board members who want to speak, and then we will have 9 continued public comments. It's your Friday, so plan your comments. Who is next is Councilmember Fisher.
Thanks, Vice Chair. As we've sat here, we've had this discussion today. I feel like there's a couple different perspectives of our regional plan and how we go about it. I think one of them is the field of dreams. If we build it, they're going to come. The second part of it is our prospective ridership, which is the green eggs and ham group, that they don't know that they like this. And so I think that as we go forward, we've heard a great deal of comments from our public today and the importance of frequency and their needs. And we also understood that there are a great deal of people who can't afford to be in cars. And so we have to be sympathetic to that. But again, our opportunity really lies with those who haven't experienced positive public transit at this point. In Imperial Beach, I can tell you, back in November, they kicked off the Rapid 227. And we have a large group of people in Imperial Beach who may or may not have ever ridden public transit, but they will never, ever try it because of the bad taste that's left in their mouth. Just to kind of frame up what the 227 is it comes from the border. Again, we've finally got some data ridership from MTS. It took us way too long to get it, but where it originates along that path, they have about 2,500 riders a day. It goes a few miles and it's very quick. Once it gets into Imperial Beach, the ridership, I disagree. They said it was 10%. We call it the ghost bus. It's a 60-foot long electric bus that goes through again, if you've ever been to Imperial Beach, it's not very big. From one side of our main artery to the other side, down a residential street. And you can just imagine what a 60-foot bus is like going down your street. Somebody mentioned it earlier of much wear and tear. This bus runs 20 hours out of the day. It runs every 15 minutes or so. So you can only imagine if you had a 60-foot bus going past your house, empty 80 times a day. And I only know this because I have a resident in my district who counted. He sat there and counted the bus routes. He stayed up all day long just to count it. So I think, and again, my point is not to say that we can't or shouldn't start pilot projects. We need to see what the data results into. But we also have to be cognizant of the impacts it has. As the board, we will approve these projects to go forward. And then we turn them over in a situation like this, we turn over to MTS. However, I think we need to do better to follow up on what we're doing is the positive and the negative impacts to community and be real with ourselves. We focus a lot on data here, MTS should be collecting data for ridership, and we should be smart about it. I think it was Vice Mayor Molina mentioned, if there's low ridership, can't we have a smaller bus? Can't we look at the effectiveness and the efficiencies? Because at the end of the day, this money is not ours. It's not MTS's, it's our taxpayers. We have a responsibility to make sure that whatever plans that we're putting out there for approval, implementing, it should benefit the taxpayers who use it or not. If we look at that, we use the ridership data, then there's a savings. Well, what do? Well, I would like to see that, these transit stations, the stops, that they're safer, they're clean, they have a lot more cleanliness. I think we have to look a little bit different and not just throw these darts. Councilmember Gasoline, I don't know how many you wrote down. It looked like a lot, 60 or so. 64 routes that, we're going to see in the future plan. If we were to look at them, from our own pocketbook and say, hey, what's the best thing to do? Let's look at the efficiencies of them. Let's make sure they're really working. Let's have honest conversations that if they're not working, that they get discontinued. If they need, more frequency, that's great. But, for somebody to have an empty bus come by them. And again, one of the things we've seen 3 buses stacked up right in front of our beach city, in front of a restaurant. I can't tell you how many pictures we've had. And I wish our rep from MTS was here. MTS has been very slow to respond and very elusive in their response. And as a small city, we don't appreciate that a lot. Again, we're not saying that there aren't people who need it. We're just questioning the frequency of how often it comes through our city streets. So my point really is that as we go forward with any of our plans, any of our projects, that we should be cognizant of the fact of the cost and the impacts.
Thank you. Councilmember Shu.
Thank you, Chair. So it's getting late, so I'll try to be fast. Susan, I have a quick question with regards to funding in the future. I know you had to have a constraint plan and a constraint with all the funding sources with a conservative estimate. Are there some other alternative sources for funding one was suggested by Mayor Minto, for example? Can we have that in our discussion as well? There's a number of processes that are used all over the world. We're one of the wealthiest parts of the world, and San Diego, I think, is still pretty successful compared to the rest of the country. And it really seems like we should be able to fund a world-class transit system without having to tax the poor more. But that's what I see being forwarded, is the continuation of a regressive sales tax rather than a different kind of system of funding our transit system that would be much more progressive rather than regressive. So there are schemes for that, and I like to see it. We should at least be making an informed decision whether or not we should go forward, perhaps with a more forward-thinking and aggressive program with regards to transit development, and will still show to the federal government that it is possible to raise those funding, and it is meets their criteria of plausible funding. Anyway, so I didn't really mean that to be a question, but if that's, is that something that we can move towards, Susan?
What we do is we take a look at what all the other MPOs are doing and seeing if any of those kind of funding sources would work for us. So in this plan, we have added fund types that we haven't had in the past. The last mile delivery fee, for example, is one of them that we don't currently have in our plan, but we added it into this new plan. And so, yes, we are absolutely looking at other ways of funding the needs that we have. So that's definitely something that we're constantly looking at. I know this time around, we looked at potentially there's military funding for transportation around military installations. So we're constantly looking at other sources of funding that are outside of your typical transportation funding streams.
Thank you. And I hope, I don't know if that can be brought into the discussion with the public and us with regards to how to go forward, because I see the same old thing being placed forward. We're constrained, and because of these limited funds in the future. That's not thinking out of the box. That's not how Hong Kong pays for its transit system. That's not how, many other places in the world pay for their transit system that is world class. So we should be looking at that. I don't know if other MPOs in California is a good example because they're not doing any better than we are. Next, I'd like to speak a little bit about the Purple Line. And I know that SANDAG is making a priority, but if we keep on, we've been talking about it for over 20 years. If we keep on changing the alignment and changing technology, we're never going to be able to engineer it on time. So my suggestion is let's really move forward quickly on it. The Purple Line is also something that I think is important to the cross-border issue. The whole cross-border strategy with transit going across to Tijuana cannot be dependent just on the Blue Line. The Blue Line is already pretty much at capacity to enhance the cross-border concept for any private partnership. We really can enhance it if we say the Purple Line is going to be coming online soon. So I think that would help the cross-border issue as well as deal with the equity issue. There's two transit lines, some of you may have heard me say this before, that are built for people. The rest of the trolley system in our trolley system is made for freight, but we're secondly, putting people on it. Those two are in the wealthiest parts real estate in this county. The Midcoast trolley extension and the Green Line are transit lines that are made for people that are grade separated. That inequity has not been addressed. The Purple Line was supposed to mean it. So I'm really dismayed that it keeps on being pushed back a little bit here and there. We should be able to move forward on it quickly and just go with the best engineering we have today and not worry about what it might be like tomorrow. And with regards to greenhouse gas reduction, I just want to clear if I'm straight. We had an RTP that was 22% reduction by 2035 before it was amended. Then we went to 18.6, and now we're going with 19%. And that we won't be able to use EVs, is that correct, Antoinette, and as part of that 19% reduction?
Not to the same level. I think we'll still get a little bit of credit for EVs, but not the same amount.
So I just want to make this clear that our aspiration in this new plan is not even the 22% we had before, but 0.4 or maybe if you add not having the EVs, 1.5% reduction in greenhouse reduction from our previous plan or current plan. To me, that's a pretty sad statement in terms of our aspirations and our address to dealing with climate change, especially when you consider that reducing greenhouse gas emissions also reduces pollution and improves health conditions and equity issues in our communities. So to me, that's a very, very sad goal to have. On top of that, we know the current guidelines from CARB, which is state law based on AB 32, which is 25% VMT reduction per capita by 2030. That should be our goal, and I really insist that we have alternatives in this plan to reach that goal. I know it's CEQA required already. Let's see it up front, and let's see it in a discussion with our communities, because I think our communities will want people to have less asthma and less illness, and that is something that can be done. I hear a lot about empty buses or buses with very few people on them. You know what I'd also see on our roadway? A lot of cars driving by with only the driver and a lot of empty seats. So I'll ask the board, who's paying for those empty seats? To me, that's what the managed lane process is about, and that's why we need to be moving forward on that. We need to fill those seats. And if we fill those seats, we actually reduce the cost of transportation for people that are still stuck in cars. That's the way we have to think about this process going forward. With regards to rail and buses and BRT, I was in that discussion over 20 years ago. Unfortunately, our region chose wrongly. We chose to do a few BRTs and not build light rail and keep people in cars. And we're paying for it today because now we have to go to a third world progress, which is BRT. So throughout the world, many cities, many countries are faced with the same issues of not being able to pay for transit systems. They have to go the poor people's route, third world route, which is BRT, which is fine. I understand we have to go forward with that, but let's keep that in mind, that that's not the best solution. That all these other places in the world that have faced the same problems we have know that the light rail is really the best answer going forward. It is actually more cost effective in the long run. It pays for itself. And we see that example throughout the United States as well, whether you go to New York, Portland, San Francisco, those investments do pay for itself as you move forward and break the cost.
Jack, can you wrap up?
Yes, I will. I'm going to lose everything. Anyway, I will wrap up and leave out my last 3 points. I forgot to say Happy New Year to everyone. It's the Year of the Dragon that we're celebrating for actually a 2-week period. I left a few snacks if you didn't get any at the table there. So it's going to be a great year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Councilmember Goebel.
Thank you. This plan, this is for the capital or construction cost only. It's not for the operating costs going forward.
No, it's everything. It's programs, policies, capital, operating, maintenance. It's all costs
So it's all
associated.
costs. Okay. With respect to the bus thing, that seems to be the piece that could be sooner than later. It's much more complex to build an interchange versus add a rapid route. To the comment earlier about phasing, it might be good to see the cost of that quick phase, rapid buses, versus the cost of the longer phases, the freeways and managed lanes and things like that. Because if you only get the sales tax approved in 2028, what can you get 2032? What can you get? So there's the phasing almost goes with the revenue that goes along with it. With regard to the rapid buses, 64 of them, thank you for counting, there are some issues that I'd like you to be involved with. We heard from MTS yesterday, there used to be 9 manufacturers of buses pre-pandemic, and now there are 2. So what it means is New Flyer, which is one of those 2, currently has 300 buses sitting partially complete in their factory, waiting for supply chain issues to resolve itself. So not only do we have fewer manufacturers and more people competing for buses, we also have supply chain issues. So if these 64 are sooner than later things, we also need to talk to our federal partners, the Department of Transportation, about supply chain and production capabilities. That will be an important piece of the discussion. Have we talked to employers about incentives to work from home?
Yes, we have a very robust transportation demand management program, and we have a team that works with employers across the county on telework, van pool, carpool, transit. It's a very successful program.
Okay, I think that's an important part because maybe you don't necessarily need a bus to get them to work. You can incentivize the employer to make them work from home. My last point would be the NEVs. Is that a neighborhood electrical vehicle? Is that what I'm hearing that is?
Correct.
And is that, I think in El Cajon, we got a grant from SANDAG to operate 2 or 3 for a year and a half. Is that what that is? Kind of an intra-city on-demand shuttle? Is that what that is?
Yeah, you may have seen them downtown San Diego, the Circuit program. Oceanside has a NEV shuttle as well, and they look like little open electric vehicles.
But those are key. If we're going to talk about an expanded transit system, those are key because first mile, last mile is the hardest for people who want to ride transit. Many of the 97% of San Diegans who don't ride transit, it's because of first mile, last mile issues. So that's definitely an important key, and I'd love to see that there. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Mayor Kranz.
Thank you. I took the cue from Mayor Minto, who was very thrifty and used his save the date card to write some notes on. Thank you. Very ambitious and a lot of work, and I appreciate everything that you've done so far. I think for me, when I look at these maps, it does get a little challenging to kind of picture how everything's going to work. Like Mayor Jones, I think it really makes a lot of sense to have a a rapid bus that's, services Temecula. My wife is a nurse manager and has a lot of employees that live in Temecula. So, but I do look at this and say to myself, Riverside to Carlsbad Poinsettia Station. Yes, there is Palomar Hospital and there is Kaiser, but we miss Tri-City, for example. We don't get to Scripps and Encinitas. So, one of the questions that I would have is whether there's more value in moving via express routes residents of Temecula to, say, Escondido, where we have a better network of vehicles that are going to be leaving from that. So it appears like maybe the goal was to have a single seat ride, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure the riders do, but I know from transit studies, the importance of single seat ride isn't nearly as important as an efficient connection, right? So if you have enough service, then people don't necessarily object to transferring at a station. So I see that same thing with, for example, 100 and 101. You've got Rancho Bernardo to UC San Diego. Right below that, you've got Escondido to UC San Diego. And 247 is going to go down the 15 corridor, I would assume, to the 52, or excuse me, the 56. And they're going to go right through Rancho Bernardo. So do we really want 2 express routes to save 1 stop? So my request would be that we look at the rider guides that get published by the transit agencies, because they show the route and where it goes and where it stops and identify overlaps and really do the analysis of whether running 2 routes instead of 1 makes sense. I also appreciate the significant challenge. We are a metropolitan planning organization who happens to have 2 transit agencies. And so when you start looking at Rancho Bernardo, UC San Diego, more important, Escondido, UC San Diego, it's across transit agencies. So I assume we have a cooperative group that, we're planning these BRTs together with both agencies, but I see that as a lot of potential looking through each of these. I'm not going to go through all 64, but the idea is some certainty that we're being as efficient as we can. I see that. I've worked in the Kearney Mesa area before. I've worked in my home office now. I office from home now, but the company office is in Rancho Bernardo. Both of those jobs were impossible to take transit to. It was a 3-hour ride and several modes. So these are the sort of things, once we start really focusing on this, we can get it. Hopefully we can address with some of these services, like the council member from Vista. I hear her comments and wonder, well, what would she propose? That's what, Councilmember Duncan mentioned, that is, we can be critical, but do you have, what do you want to see different? So lots of work ahead. I look forward to it. Appreciate your support to serve as the vice chair on the Transportation Committee with Councilmember Hsu, Chairman Hsu, and I look forward to vetting some of these ideas. The 2 notes that I wrote, we really need to focus on some rubber-wheeled solutions, although I agree with Chair Hsu that rail would be ideal. We looked to the Blue Line for some history, and we know that took over 20 years to get completed, and we don't have that kind of time. So hopefully we can implement some rubber-wheeled solutions that someday will be either augmented or replaced by rail solutions. And then finally, you've heard it said by me before, I think that our rail system should not be driven by a corridor that was created in the 1880s. A complaint I hear often is, I don't take the train because it doesn't go where I want to go. And so we need to focus on how to make our system of rail a little bit more effective in that regard. So investing several $billion in the old route is a bad idea, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chavez.
I will be brief. First of all, thank you to all the SANDAG staff. This was incredibly helpful, and thank you for listening to us. I do want to do a quick mention as representation and service to our city and constituents. I can't leave without asking. I heard a 300 million proposed to be able to pay off the debt of the 125, the SR 125. But I also wanted to mention before I ask that question that we bought the SR 125 for 341.5 million in 2011, and then we got some funding from the state for 20 million, which was received and has a 5.5% interest accumulating in a restricted account without even counting the revenue collected by until today from this charges from using the 125. Also on Friday, the January 26th of this year, the board agenda mentioned that as of July 1st, 2023, it was 167.2 million, what was remaining in debt. And, you know, this found in our quarterly financial report in item 6, attachment 3A, page 4. So my question would bring me, and this is why we need a forum on the 125, and you know the chair has granted, and as well as Colleen to meet and discuss this, because there's information that we have as a city that this is the first time we've heard 300 million, and that worries us because from 2027 sending it to 2037 is a big gap when we have conserved this road in pristine conditions for Caltrans. And I just really want, you know, to see where you got that number from. And I know we're short on time and we don't want to lose any more board members. And I don't know if you have a response right now, but maybe moving forward for our visit on February 13th to the City Council and on our special workshop that we're going to have, maybe we can address these properly, because 300 million seems like an awful lot from the 167 million that we were mentioning and Friday, January 26th of this year.
Yeah, maybe I can clarify the best I can in a short amount of time. We are going to be presenting to your city council on Tuesday, but the amount is correct. What you said is, as of 2027, based on the cash balances we have and the outstanding debt, there's about a $15 million delta that we're short of. I think what Susan is mentioning today is if we were to take the tolls off, that's the amount of revenue that would come out of the system. In other words, if we continued collecting the tolls until we're supposed to in 2042, that's the amount of revenues that we'd be taking out of the system as opposed to the debt. So there's two different things going on here.
I apologize. We have to look on what was mentioned, but I think that it was said that in order to be able to pay off, it was 300 million. And this was when we were doing the presentation. I think Antoinette was the one who mentioned it. But anyway, we would love to sit down and talk about this, because I mean, I think I wasn't the only one who heard it, because I had a bunch of people in the city, you know, mentioning it right now. But I'm glad to hear that we are at 167. And, you know, this is meant so we could be working together and seeking out how to get this gap, and as we did with the 20 million from the state, to close this gap and hopefully keep the date of 2027. And this is what I would love to see us working toward, because it's not just Chula Vista, it's the new university that's coming. We had a lot of ideas in our workshop, the last meeting, where we were talking about adding different types of transportation to that road, and liberating a little bit of the burden that the 805 has. So moving forward, I just wanted to mention that is our primary concern, and I can't do a disservice to my city and our constituents to not bring it up again. And looking forward to our meeting and our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And our final speaker is Deputy Mayor Edson.
Thank you, Chair, at this point. I grew up with working parents and I grew up riding the bus to get to extracurricular activities, to go to places of interest. I then took the bus to college because that was I didn't have a car. I wasn't actually old enough. Then after college, during my career, I lived in New York City and Tokyo. I did grow up here. I lived in New York City and Tokyo where I rode trains and subways and occasionally buses as well. Today, I continue to ride public transportation. I primarily get to SANDAG meetings, riding a combination of the coaster and the Blue Line trolley. I know the importance of public transportation. It's something that I've embraced throughout my life. And it's one of the reasons when I was elected to council back in 2016, that the first thing I wanted to be on was a transit agency, because I know the importance of public transit to a community. So then taking off my personal hat and putting on my NCTD hat, I appreciate that SANDAG's initial concept for the 2025 regional plan includes several of NCTD's priority projects related to double tracking on both the Sprinter and Coaster rail corridors, bus service improvements, and microtransit and flexible fleets, which I think that everyone is embracing the idea of at this point. The first of these projects pilot projects is expected to launch in June. NCTD is also nearing completion of the Breeze bus and reliability study, which will provide recommendations for infrastructure improvements to improve both the speed and reliability of some of NCTD's highest ridership Breeze bus routes. As Antoinette shared, the reduction of the inclusion, of transit improvements in the 2025 regional plan is necessary to achieve the GHG reduction targets required by the state. Double tracking along the Sprinter corridor will allow NCTD, I have to say that combination all the time, and I'll tell you, I still trip over it. It will allow NCTD to double Sprinter service frequencies. These additional trip options are projected to increase ridership 7-fold by 2050. Ridership increases translate not only to GHG emissions reductions, but also vehicle miles traveled reductions, which offset VMT increases from planned highway improvements like the 78 interchange projects at both I-15 and I-5. I have a lot of different facts and figures that get presented to me before I come to these meetings, and I kind of try to put them together for you, but I realize that not everyone thinks that the coaster works, the coastal corridor works, but while it doesn't serve everyone, I know that fiscal year 2023 system-wide ridership increased 20.3% compared to FY 2022. That Breeze ridership increased 14.9% and exceeded our budgeted goals. Coaster and Sprinter ridership increased by 38.2% and 27.4% respectively. So I think that those are some important numbers and something that's important to remember and consider. And with that, NCTD looks forward to continuing to work with SANDAG and jurisdictions within the region to develop a compliant regional plan. Personally, I look forward to contributing in any way I can to bring about and increasing access to an ever-improving public transportation system for our region. Thanks.
Thank you. Wonderful. All right, this is a discussion only item. I want to thank staff again for all your work on this, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing about the modeling, which is the next step. So now we're on to continued public comments. Tessa, can you please call the first commenter?
Thank you. We had 9 continued public comments from the beginning of the meeting. If you're still present, Michael Brando and Truth, you will be called first at the podium. And then if you're present online, please raise your hand. The following people: Alex Wong, Blair B, Paul the Bold. Oh, and I apologize, Consuelo is also in person. Mary D, the original draw, and Joaquin Lucan. Michael Brando, please go ahead.
Google Heidi, HEIDI space Newell, NEWELL, GoFundMe. She spoke at the County Board of Supervisors land use meeting on Wednesday. Her life was completely wrecked, and she's got 2 senior dogs, and she needs help. You can watch her presentation on the recording of this past Wednesday's County Board of Supervisors meeting. Also, San Diego Rise Up, Instagram. If you look at their account, Melissa Grace and Renette Sinham are talking about what's happening on the ground. Renette Sinham is also on thewayforward.com, thewayfrwd.com. It's episode 68. They talk about healthy skies, healthy planet, about the geoengineering that's going on. Also on YouTube, go into a YouTube search engine, The Healthy American, Peggy Hall. She just talked about the geoengineering. This is not batshit conspiracy theory. This is going on, and you are liable and culpable for ignoring it.
Truth, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Consuelo. And I have 3 virtual commenters from the beginning of the meeting. Mary D., Paul the Bold, and the original draw. You will be called on after Consuelo.
Okay, I call the increased security situation 100% dead on. Even about how none of your reps would have to go through a metal detector. And that means all of you are a potential threat to us speakers. Because these guys right here, they're not here to protect the public. They would defend you guys before anyone else. Second, if SANDAG's main agenda is getting people to take public transit, that means you're all expecting the people who actually take it to do so unarmed when there were 2 separate violent attacks on 20-year-olds recently. Sounds like you're out of touch with reality. Third, making your neighbors go through a bag search is in violation of the 4th Amendment. And every time people go to the bathroom again, they must do all that whole process. And of course, I know there's going to be an X-ray soon. Fourth, it's also completely nonsensical when anyone can go to every city council but San Diego's without going through a metal detector, unlike the lie I heard earlier. I can even go right up to the dais and say, hi, done it. And fifth, it's no more dangerous than before. If you're that paranoid, you may be creating too many political enemies because of your bad behaviors. It's evidence of fearing opposition. And Jacktivist, does that mask help with pollution particulates? You'll be proud, though, I actually rode the circuit. It's clearer than the trolley, but no more efficient.
Our next commenter, Mary D., please go ahead.
Consuelo.
I'm sorry, Consuelo. You're in person. Please go ahead.
Okay. So let's see. Would any of you still be here if you weren't getting paid? Nora was late today. I wonder if she rode public transit. Yet, you guys expect the rest of us and the future generations to be using it. The perfect dictatorship would have the appearance of a democracy, but would basically be a prison without walls in which the prisoners would not even dream about escaping. It would essentially be a system of slavery where through consumption and entertainment, the slaves would love their servitudes. I now realize many people don't want a real change. They just want a more comfortable enslavement, especially you who actually believe that you are doing the work of the people.
Hey, now, Mary D., please go ahead.
Hi, regarding digital equity, I am making a public call for hashtag technology transparency, where you fully disclose the plans and capabilities for the technologies you keep advocating for. Given the pending legislation at the state level for speed limiters, this also then begs the question of geofencing capabilities. And for those who might be on the geofence about that issue, remember, if they can slow your car down in the areas of their choosing, they will certainly also be able to stop your car, similar to OnStar remote capabilities. Regarding the non-agenda comments process, you need to start numbering the slips on a first-come, first-served system. People who get there first shouldn't be put last in line to be heard at the end and are disenfranchised when you do that, particularly when so many of your directors leave early. Lastly, I want to go on the record as a defender of truth, both the objective kind as well as the bold speaker and well-researched advocate of privacy, justice, and the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul the Bold, please go ahead.
The San Diego double tracking is part of the pressure for the Del Mar Bluff rerouting. Routing the train tracks up the I-15 rather than Del Mar, as Mayor Krantz suggested, makes lots more sense than routing the trains under Del Mar in a deep, dangerous, and super expensive tunnel. Given the need for ventilation and escape routes, it would ruin the fairgrounds and a lot of houses. And an above-ground track route through populated cities, Del Mar, Encinitas, and all, would do too much damage to businesses and schools as well. We want a healthy business environment, not destroy housing and institutions. A longtime Bay Area resident, I have seen the scars in divided neighborhoods from transit tunnels in heavy populated areas. It would also be easier to connect to other high.
Your time expired. Our final comment to the original draw, please go ahead.
So great, a Pakistani illegal was released on the streets in San Diego and he's on the terrorist watch list. Nothing to see there. Yeah, and when you guys are sitting here and just, obviously everybody's gone, but you'll sit there and you guys are, taking up all the people's time that they could also be inputting their input into what they want to happen in this, all the plans that you guys do. But evidently air that we breathe is causing global warming. So you guys are actually need to cut down your speaking because you're influencing this global warming and it's really destroying the planet. We also need to start because they want us to eat our animals or starve them. So I don't know if you guys are going to engage in that because, right, it's like we have to save the planet in every way because they eat meat. And it's like if any of you eat meat, we're going to have to do something about that because you're not going to be able to do that. But we need to maybe have smart meters on air breathing because then you guys can be cut down in your time and not have to show all the propaganda that you guys spew out to the people. Everything that you're doing is totally corrupt. It's fraud, waste, and abuse, and you're enslaving the people and we're paying.
Your time expired, and that concludes the continued non-agenda public comments.
Thank you. And this concludes our meeting. The next Board of Directors meeting will be Friday, February 23rd at 9 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.
Good job.